Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Izuku has Blacklight Quirk part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends, and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Izuku panicked when the sludge thing entered his lungs. He couldn't breathe a cold breath. Did he even need to breathe? And like that, the pain for air stopped. He stopped struggling. The monster stated. Izuku proceeded to lock his body in place. What the? Move, damn it, the thing yelled. Izuku proceeded to try something new. He began to shrink his lungs. This led to many surprise curses. And then, Texas smash. The villain disintegrated around him. Izuku looked up and oh might. He thought before he passed out. Hey. Izuku woke up to the feeling of someone slapping his cheeks. Are you alright? He looked up and, all might. He screamed, backing up quickly. Sorry for dragging you into that fight, my boy. He shouted. The number one pro hero, All Might. Izuku's brain was stuck on that. Autograph, need to find something for him to sign. Notebook. He opened to Ang page only to find he already did. He mentally shouted. Thank you. He shouted, bowing so fast he was Okay. All Might said. Now then, I'll take this villain to the police. They already? Izuku asked. Pro heroes are always needed. Therefore I must go. Wait. I still have questions. Izuku said. See you. All Might shouted, before leaping into the sky. That's weird, I feel a weight on my legs, All Might thought to himself. Turning around he saw that kid holding onto his leg. Hey. You're insane, you hear me? Let go now. He shouted, trying to pry Izuku off. Boo, but if I do I'll die. Izuku responded. He actually wasn't sure if he would. It was a possibility though. Oh right. All Might said. There's so much I want to ask you about. Izuku shouted. Okay. Just close your eyes and mouth. He shouted. Izuku did so. He patted the boy on the back and then he coughed. Shit, he thought to himself. Meanwhile Izuku was wondering where the scent of oud came from. They landed on an apartment building on the other side of town. That was terrifying. Izuku wheezed out, trying to regain control of his legs. Good grief. The people in the building will be to help you down. The pro hero said, calmly but in a stern tone. Wait. Izuku called. No. I shall not. The pro shouted, obviously preparing to fight another villain. I is a posse to become a hero without a quirk, Izuku shouted at the top of his lungs. Without a quirk. All Might said, as if he had to think deeply about that. And then All Might felt it. Oh no. Not here. Not now. He coughed hard. And then the steam started to rise. Maybe because I'm quirkless, I'm always made fun of, Izuku lied. He hated doing it, but what choice did he have? Hey, I have a quirk that makes me eat people. Yeah, that'd go over well. And why was it going haywire? Why did it sense weakness? Why did it sense prey? All Might was the only one next to him, and he wasn't anything of the sort. He shook the idea of prey out of his head. The last thing he wanted was to see humans as food. That's probably why I find the idea of saving people really cool, and because I'm a monster. I want to be like you and save people with a fearless smile. Can I ever be to save them, or will I eat them by accident? That's why I want to be the greatest hero, like you. He finished, looking at his idol. He noticed a lot of steam, and wondered where it came from. Then it cleared, revealing a frail man. Why, he shouted in shock. You're deflating, Izuku shouted. Hey, are you a fake? You're so skinny. He continued. The frail man, who was All Might, sighed. I am All Might. You know how people flex at pools? It's like that. And then he gushed oud from his mouth. Why, Izuku shouted, both out of shock and to keep the tendrils from seeking fresh meat. Young man, now that you've seen me like this, please don't tell anyone. Don't post about this online, even accidentally. He then lifted his shirt, showing what looked like the impact zone of a giant bullet. 5 years ago I was badly injured by an enemy of mine. Half of my respiratory organs were destroyed. My stomach was also completely annihilated. I've become emaciated from repeated surgeries, and the after effects. I can only work as a hero for 3 hours a day. After that he gestured to himself. 5 years ago? Izuku asked, desperately trying to force down the feeling of his back beginning to bulge. Is that when you fought Toxic Chainsaw? All Might grumbled at that. That punk couldn't have defeated me. He growled. The fight that did this was kept from the world, as per my request. I will still save people with a smile. I, the symbol of peace, cannot be daunted by evil. I smile to show the pressure of heroes and to suppress the fear within me. Pros like me are always risking their lives. Therefore, I cannot say you can become a hero without powers. Those words slammed into Izuku like a cinder rock. I see, he choked out, now finally beginning to prevent his feeding tendrils from showing up. If you really want to help people, why don't you become a police officer? They're often teased for getting villains hand delivered to them, but it is still a worthy occupation. He paused just before entering a stairwell. It is good to dream, but remember what is realistic. He said as a parting. As Sashinori walked down the stairs, he contemplated the situation. Maybe I was a bit harsh, but that's the way of the world. Also, why did he look familiar? It's like I've seen his face somewhere before. I might have seen him at a signing booth or something. Now then, I have to get the sludge thing to the police soon. He paused as he reached into his pocket and found nothing. What? Where is it? He asked himself, as he looked around. And then he saw the plume of smoke. Damn it, when the kid grabbed me I must have dropped it. I was careless, he said to himself. He then quickly ran to the scene in his deflated form. He'd have to use that. He soon arrived at the scene. He saw Death Arms and his pals fighting against the sludge man. Damn, it escaped. He then overheard the people talking. It has a child as a hostage. Why aren't the pros doing anything? That chilled Izuku. I'm pathetic, he cursed at himself. Meanwhile Izuku was looking through his notebook. He stopped on the page with All Might's signature. His words kept going through his head. It's good to dream, but remember what is realistic. Even a pro said it. I can't be a hero without a quirk, and mine is just evil. He wiped tears from his eyes. Shut it. You already knew this. Another part of his mind said. Well, Dad'll be happy, he thought to himself. His father was away on a business trip, and he had been for 5 years. He still checked in by call or text whenever he could though. Maybe I should tell him when I get home, he thought. And then he saw the sludge monster. Shit. How to get free. And then he remembered. He had knocked the bottle out of All Might's hands. This is my fault, he thought. Where's All Might? He heard one of the civilians shout. Damn it, this is my fault, I wasted his time, Izuku thought to himself. And then he saw who the hostage was. Kachin. He shouted. Katsuki screamed in anger and slight fear. Someone, anyone, do something. He screamed in his mind. Kachin. He heard Izuku shout. Shit. I take it back. Anyone but him. Hey. You. I'll get you this tea, what the fuck. This last part was because of the fact that Izuku had spouted those god-awful tendrils from his back. Let him go. Izuku shouted, fists clenched. Or what? The slime villain mocked. Who's that? Someone shouted. Izuku glared. Please don't make me use this. He pleaded. Ha! Your little decorations don't scare him, what the fuck are you doing? The villain shouted as Izuku buried the tendrils into him. And then Bakugo saw the villain being consumed by the wriggling mass that spread over it. It detached that part of itself, which then became nothing but fluid which was greedily slurped up by the tendrils. Last chance. Let. Izuku's teeth elongated. Him. And red spines grew out of his back, rippling like a set of waves. Go. And then his hands became claws. The villain rushed away from him, leaving Katsuki on the streets coughing. And then All Might appeared. Even though I admonished you, I didn't put it into practice, he declared. All Might. The sludge villain shouted. Pros are always risking their lives. He screamed, fluid pouring from his mouth. Detroit, smash. He declared, vaporizing the villain. The force of the punch was so powerful that it caused a great gust of wind. If it wasn't for Mount Lady, the other pros would have been blown away. And then it caused a temporary tornado. The pressure change then caused clouds to roll in, and then it started to rain. Hey. With a single punch All Might changed the weather. A bystander shouted. The after effects were predicted. Izuku was scolded by the heroes and law enforcement officers, save a rookie cop named Katani, who was arguing with her superior, while Katsuki was praised. But he ignored it. Some help you all were, he thought to himself. He turned to look at his friend. He scared the absolute crap out of him, but they were still friends. Why aren't you praising the person who actually did the work? He thought. Later that day Izuku was walking through his neighborhood. I never got to apologize to All Might for wasting his time and lying, he thought to himself. Maybe I'll post it on his website. Now his thoughts drifted to the use of his quirk. He shuddered at how satisfying it was to feed off of the villain, how full he felt, and how it mutated. Those claws weren't there before, he thought. Is it that I become stronger the more I consume? Deku. It was Kachin. Now, most people would assume that he was being mean. However, it was an agreement between the two. Izuku could call him Kachin, while he could call Izuku Deku. He had stopped running and was panting. I just wanted to say thanks, he said. And also please don't do that again. I'm gonna have nightmares again. Sorry. Izuku stuttered. He knew Kachin didn't like his quirk, and he knew of the nightmares it caused him. It was one of the reasons he never tried to show it. He had had similar nightmares, although he was pretty sure that the views were different, as his involved watching himself devour everything. His friend waved goodbye before walking off. Now then. I need to think of a realistic future. I am here. They all might be, but you were surrounded by reporters. Hahaha. It's all too easy for me to get away from them. Why? Because I'm All Might. The last part was because his form dropped back to his deflated mode, and he coughed up a lot of food. Izuku screamed. Thankfully the feeding tendrils didn't show up, probe why because of the meal he'd just eaten. Young man, I came for a few reasons. First of all, thank you. If you hadn't spoken to me, I'd just be a guy in a bodysuit who was all talk. It was my fault, Izuku stuttered. I got in your way because of all of the things I said. And that brings me to the second reason. Why did you lie to me? What? I saw your quirk. It was rather impressive. All Might said, disappointment written all over his face. It's not impressive. Izuku stated to the ground. All it can do is kill. You saw what it did. It devours people. Whenever I smell food and I can smell it now, I have to force the feeding tendrils down. Feeding tendrils? Is that what they're called? All Might asked. Why yes. And you knew you had this quirk before? Why yes. I'll tell you how it was activated. When Kachin the kid who the sludge monster was holding hostage and I were kids, we got lost exploring the city. And then a man offered us help. Of course, we knew not to talk to strangers, so we shook our heads. And then he lunged at us and grabbed us. Kachin, I mean Katsuki, has a quirk that allows him to sweat a nitroglycerin-like substance, only it's a lot more powerful, so he can make explosions. At the time, he could only make things the size of party poppers. So they didn't help. He trailed off, thinking about that fateful night. The man held onto them both and he wouldn't let go. Kachin was bound and gagged, screaming under his gag, tears filling his eyes. Izuku backed away into the street wall. Now that your friend's bound, I'll just start with you. The obese man chuckled, removing his belt. Izuku began to scream. Help. Anyone. Hell, and then that fat man pressed a greasy hand to his chin under his mouth. Yes. Scream. I love it when they scream. He grabbed Izuku by the hair and dragged him to his van. Let me go. Izuku shouted as he futilely struggled. Stop shouting. It's not like anyone will hear you. My quirk stops all sound around me. Let me go, 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 let me go. Izuku felt his back begin to hurt. Jitov. The man laughed and tossed Izuku to the ground. Now then, let's begin, he sneered, beginning to take his pants off. Izuku screamed both from fear and in the pain of his back ripping open. Oh god, the man gasped. And then Izuku looked behind him and saw it. 4 tendrils, each wriggling and covered with spikes at the end. Katsuki saw the man pause before he got to Izuku, and then he saw those things appear. The man screamed in shock. And then 4 squelching sounds rang out, one after the other. Izuku didn't know what was going on. The 4 tendrils impaled themselves in the man, and then he started to melt. He screamed in agony as he dissolved into substance. And then, before the substance could lose his shape, a sound like dry grass rang out, and he dissolved into the tendrils. Izuku felt the tendrils retract into him. And then the memories hit. He saw the man claim his first victims, what he did to them, and when he put them out of their misery. He saw him evade capture for years. And then he saw himself consume the man. And then it was over. He sat there for a few minutes, gasping as the memories slowly faded from his mind. The last thing he remembered was seeing a police officer radio in for backup before darkness took him. And that's what happened. Izuku finished, swallowing the bile forming in his throat. He didn't want to think of how good it felt to consume, to feed, to devour that man. It doesn't matter what quirk you have. Do you know what every great hero has said about their first rescue, their first heroic act? Their bodies moved on their own. And I'm positive you had the same feeling. Izuku fell to the ground, tears in his eyes. You can be a hero. All Might finished. To hear that no matter how evil his quirk was, All Might believed in him, was something that made him cry out. A massive weight was lifted from his shoulders. And this was how Izuku Midoriya started down the path to become the world's greatest hero. The sludge villain was left in a small box in a holding cell. It wasn't comforting. That green-haired brat, damn him. He shouted. When I get out of here, I'll take over his body and use it to kill his mother. But before I kill her, I'll rape her. And then when I've broken her, I'll slit her throat and set their house on fire. And then he stopped his ranting when he felt a presence. It was incredibly powerful and incredibly evil. It felt like something was choking out the sun, leaving the world in perpetual darkness. What was it you said you were going to do to my wife, with my son's body no less? A deep, almost mechanical voice coldly said. The sludge villain rotated his eyes towards the source. It was a tall man with the act mask on his face. Who are you? How did you get in? He yelled. I simply invited myself in. In the station, all of the police officers were in varying states of injury. The only one that wasn't was hyperventilating. Focus Katani, she said to herself as she slunk towards an emergency phone. This is Katani Rakia. We have a high-powered intruder. Can you give us a description of the intruder? Well, he had a giant act mask over his head. As an answer to your question, I am Hisashi Midoriya, the father and honorary uncle of the 2 young children you tried to kill. I don't take kindly to those threatening my family. The man picked up the box. Now then, I'd love to chat more, but I have places to go, you to torture, a son to call, and a student to tutor. With that he vanished in a cloud of axe smoke, taking the caged villain with him. And? So yeah, Izuku has Blacklight and Afo as his dad. I'm a huge fan of the theory BTW. He wouldn't be able to do pretty much anything Alex or Heller could do yet, so as to not make him up right off the bat. He'll get stronger the more he eats though. Izuku continued to cry. All Might, the symbol of peace, had told him that he could become a hero. He heard the voice of those who said it was impossible, from Yudo the class bully ha. You could never become a hero. From the Quirk counselor from his school you have no quirk, therefore you are worthless. Now stop holding Katsuki back. To his teacher ha 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 ha. Look everyone. Izuku applied for UA. All those voices were now drowned out by a mere 6 words, spoken with complete certainty and sincerity. Izuku, you can become a hero. Can anything more shocking happen? The hero who I look up to the most told me my dreams are not impossible. And like that, the rarest of events happened. The universe decided to not fuck up Izuku. Instead, the laws of reality allowed him to be shocked in a better way. You are worthy to inherit my power. All Might said, spreading his hands wide. Izuku stopped crying. H. He choked out, eyes white in confusion. Inherit your power. Wah. Ha 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 ha. Your face was ridiculous. But still, he raised a bony finger into the sky. You need to decide whether you want to inherit my POW hackflumph. The last part of the word was drowned out by the oot pouring from his mouth. Neither one of them really cared at the moment. When I say my power, I mean my quirk. The papers and the taoids both seem to think that it's a super strength or boost quirk, but during interviews, I always dodge the question. I made jokes to cover that up. This is because the symbol of peace had to be a natural-born hero. However, young man, I'll tell you the truth. He spread his arms out again, head pointed at the sky. This power was gifted to me like a sacred torch. Izuku gasped. It was passed on to you? He asked. Yes, and now it's your turn, All Might told him. Wait. Its true quirk has been hotly debated as one of the world's greatest mysteries. In fact, there's always someone online who's talking about it. However, I don't know what you mean by inheriting. Sure, quirks grow from parent to child, although there are some mutations, like mine, but one person freely giving their quirk to another, I've never heard of that, and it's never even been considered. And you may stop right there before you pass out. All Might deadpanned. His muttering was making him nervous. Why was it making him nervous? I don't ever lie. You shouldn't either. Izuku flinched at the accusation, but he knew that All Might was right. The quirk is the ability to transfer power. It's called One for All. One for All? Izuku asked. The very words themselves held power. That's right. One person adds to the power before passing it on. Then the next holder adds to his power and passes it on again. The quirk grows stronger with each generation. He finished, clenching his fist. Then why are you giving me this power? Izuku asked. All Might chuckled. I've been looking for a successor for years now. Now, I think that you'd be the best successor. You, who were so afraid of your own quirk that you'd lie immediately, used it to protect your friend without any hesitation. You were the most heroic back there. He then paused. Of course, this is your choice. He told me his secret. He encouraged my dream. How can I say no? I'll do it, he declared. All Might laughed. I thought you'd say that. Can I tell my parents? It's probably for the best. All Might shrugged. Of course. After all, it's important your parents know of this. At night Izuku hurriedly called his father. Dad. Guess what? Oh, what is it, Izuku? His father asked. I met All Might today. He exclaimed. Oh? His father asked. Get this? He told me his quirk. There was a short pause. That sounds interesting. What was it? His father had been the one to get him interested in quirks. He has said if you know a quirk, you know its weakness. If you know a weakness, you can defeat your enemies. It's called One for All. It's a transfer quirk as well. There was another pause. That's unique, his father said. And he told me he'd like to pass it on to me. And I said yes. Silence. Dad. I am proud of you, Izuku, his father said, although it sounded forced. Izuku knew his dad didn't like All Might. He didn't know why though. He said that All Might was the only hero that actually lived up to the title, and therefore was the only hero worthy of any respect. Well, I told Mom, and she said she's proud of me too. Have a good night. Izuku excitedly said. Good night, son, his father replied, before Izuku hung up. All for One carefully set the phone down before sighing. He quickly activated a quirk that made himself silent. And then he opened his mouth. All Might, you mother bastard. Out of all of the posse successors you chose my son, granted I'm happy that the quirk will be back in the family, he finished, calming down. He cancelled the quirk and turned around. A sludge villain, now minus his quirk, it had been given to a quirkless boy who was about 5 years younger than his son. Whimpered as All for One turned to him. Now then, what to do with you? I've already dug out your nails, chopped off your fingers and toes, made you eat them, and he started to mutter under his breath. His doctor knocked on the door. Sir. We figured out how to do it. Oh really? He called back. Yes. We just need a test subject. All for One grinned under his mask. We already have one. And thus, 2 days later, Izuku was staring at the trash of Dagaba Beach Park. Why are we here? He asked. All Might, in his muscle form, laughed. My quirk, One for All, is the combined physical prowess of multiple people. If you were to claim it now, in an unprepared body, your limbs would tear themselves from your body and explode. They explode, Izuku murmured. Hence the training. And there's another reason. All Might grabbed an old fridge and crushed it flat. Heroes today are after the flashy things. It's all about popularity for them. However, being a hero also involves volunteer work like this. This is your first step, young Midoriya. You are to restore the horizon to this beach by clearing it before you leave for UA in 10 months. All of this? He hysterically questioned. It's the sad truth of reality that to get into the UA hero course, you have to have a quirk, and while you do have one, you're reluctant to use it. Therefore you have to train your body. I see. He immediately ran over to grab a washing machine to carry it. There, you might want to start smaller, All Might grimaced. Izuku was too caught up in the rush of trying to please his favorite hero. It came as a surprise to both of them that he could pick it up. "Wah," was all Izuku could say. "Young Midoriya, your arms are flashing ak and red. Is that normal for you?" Izuku looked at his arms and sure enough, they were pulsing red and ak. Just like the tendrils is this part of my quirk, he thought to himself. He proceeded to try to throw it, and it went about 15 feet. That should speed things up a bit. All Might laughed. I guess, Izuku muttered. All Might then pulled out a pile of papers. Well, this is worthless now. He proceeded to rip it up. I wrote that last night as your training regimen. However, seeing your quirk adds a strength factor, I'll have to rewrite it. Now then, I want you to use your quirk to the best of your abilities for the day so I can better understand your current strength. And so began the 10 months of hell for Izuku. The rest of the day was spent applying his quirk to enhance his muscles. He found that he could carry around 10 times as much when his quirk was activated than when it wasn't activated. Of course, this meant that when his strength went up, the amount he could carry when his quirk was in use went up as well. This led to All Might encouraging him to not use his quirk. If you strengthen your body now, you'll be able to use your quirk even more, he had said. On the second day, All Might saw the tendrils in action in the fullest. All Might had run out of time for the day, so he was just watching Izuku. He was currently carrying a 10-pound tire. Alright. It's getting to be about noon, so let's break for lunch, he shouted. Yes, sir. Izuku panted out. And then a rustling was heard. Alright, this is a good place to store the loot. No one's around. Izuku froze. All Might's out of time, so there's no way to fight back. I'll have to be careful. Hey Izuku. You alright? Shit. Well, what have we here? Izuku. Toshinori called. Hey. No sudden moves. All Might froze at that. A robber, one that managed to escape from the bank robbery that he managed to stop, mostly, had a gun to his heir's head. Now then, you're going to stay right there. The man said. MMPH. Izuku shouted into his gag. I'm out of time today. Damn it. He thought to himself. He raised a hand. Hey, can you just let us go? He politely asked. No sudden moves. Now get down on the ground. The robber shouted. Toshinori began to lower himself when he began to cough upward. Well then, since you're dying already, I have no use for you. He then pointed the gun at his head. MMMMMMMPPPPHHHH. Izuku began to struggle. Hey, stop struggling, brat. The man shouted. He then fired his gun into Izuku's head, owing his brains out. Toshinori's ood ran cold, and tears began to form in his eyes. He had failed to stop the death of an innocent child. Now then, there can't be any witnesses, the murderer stated. However, before he could shoot, they both saw something coming out of Izuku's head. It was a mass of tendrils. The brain matter around him shriveled up, while the tendrils started to turn into recognizable human body parts. Soon, Izuku's head was back to normal. What? The murderer shouted. And then with a sickening crack, Izuku's back split open. He was on the ground at the time, face first, so his back was to the sky. Toshinori saw the tendrils pop out, and then they impaled the killer. Then, before he had time to scream, he began to dissolve into goo which the tendrils absorbed with horrifying sucking sounds. And then, Izuku's hands twitched. He brought his arms up to his head, and a hissing sound of pain was heard. After a few seconds, Izuku pushed himself up. What the hell was that? Toshinori choked out. That was my quirk, Izuku stated without emotion. I see. So that's what you meant. At least you're alive, Yogi said. That part isn't new to me. Izuku replied. One of the bullies at school, a kid named Muto, stabbed me in the gut and ran. When I pulled the knife out I saw myself heal. The fact Izuku said this without a negative reaction was quite horrifying. Someone tried to kill you. Toshinori was stuck on that. Why didn't you report it? Izuku shrugged. I did. The principal dismissed the claim as he thought, along with almost everyone else, that I was quirkless. According to the medical records, I have the extra toe joint. Toshinori growled at that. It gets worse. My quirk, that is, Izuku said. I know everything he knew. I know his body count. This wasn't his first time. He works for a gang. They use the money to buy sex slaves. He preferred them young. Oh my god, Toshinori gasped. That's incredible. That statement was not something Izuku was expecting. What? Izuku stuttered, shocked out of his emotionless state. You can survive a lethal wound. Do you know what that means? You're unstoppable. He started laughing. Don't fear your quirk, my boy. After all, now we know that you can survive that. You could survive probably anything. No villain would be able to rest easy during the night. And if they knew your ability, then they'd be able to use cannon fodder to hide, as the fodder would know. Now then, do you want lunch? He asked. Izuku shook his head. No. I just ate. What do you owe? He said. Izuku sighed. And then they heard another person. Hey. Yusateo. You done? They both paled. And then, Izuku's body was covered in the tendrils. With a whoosh of wind, the robber was in his place. Toshinori was shocked. And then Izuku spoke with the robber's voice. Yeah, I'm done. I'll see you tonight. They heard footsteps leaving. And then Izuku's form shifted back to his true form. That was surprising. Was all Izuku said. Why, you can take the form of those you, what did you call it? Consume. Yes, consume. And you know what they knew. You, my friend, are the perfect infiltrator. Izuku was shocked by the praise from his hero. He was still shocked by how easy it was to disguise himself like that. And now his hero was telling him that it could be useful. Sure, it would involve killing, but Izuku knew that villains had died under All Might's fists before. Those were usually the ones that bragged about raping people. The rest of the months soon passed along. Izuku focused hard in school, and All Might had given him an updated aim to pass, American Dream plan that involved his quirk. Of course, it still came as a shock to Izuku when he found that he didn't need to sleep like normal people. He only needed about 4 hours of rest, and that was when he was working so hard. He used the extra hours to do homework and some other exercises. This led to the beach getting cleared up even quicker. However, some things never change. It was the morning of the entrance exam. Toshinori had decided to see how his successor was doing on the beach. He knew that there was still a lot to be done, but Izuku had met expectations. His body should be ready, especially since the fact that he could come back from lethal injuries showed itself 10 months ago. And then he heard it. Shocked, he looked up and saw Izuku atop a giant pile of trash. He did it, he finished up on the final night. And then he looked around. The beach is spotless. Not a single dust speck remains. He even got the parts I explicitly told him he didn't have to get. Oh, my. Toshinori became All Might out of sheer shock. Goodness. Izuku then whopped from the tower of junk and fell. But before he could hit the ground, All Might caught him. To his surprise, Izuku was still able to talk. All Might, I did it. He whispered out. Indeed you did, young Midoriya. He then pulled out a phone. Look. I took pictures for you. He showed his pupil the picture labeled before. How do you feel? I feel really tired and hungry, Izuku managed to pant out. Fear not. All Might shouted. He quickly ran back to his van where he had a few rabbits. Eat up. He shouted, tossing them into the air. The feeding tendrils shot out and speared them midair. I see your timing is improving as well. And your claws. He had started to train Izuku to use his claws a month ago. His pupil concentrated for a moment before his hands became giant claws, far larger than his head. Each talon was as sharp as a sword and had the size to match. Izuku kept up to the tower and sliced the tire into clean pieces. All Might then picked up a steel car and threw it. Izuku then jumped up and sliced at it as well. When it came down, the average gouge in the steel was 4 inches deep. I think you'll be able to get through a lot of steel soon, All Might said. Izuku nodded. You are clearly ready to gain one for all. Izuku nodded again. Thank you. He shouted. All Might then reached to the back of his head and plucked out a hair. Remember, this is a power you earned. Now, eat this. He shouted. That brought Izuku to a stop. Ha. You need a bit of DNA to gain it. Anything's fine. And then the tendrils stood straight up and rushed his hand. Shit was what All Might thought. Even now, the mere idea of those getting into him frightened him. One gently wrapped itself around the hair and pulled back a bit before consuming it. That was quite risky. All Might breathed out. Izuku shrugged. I knew that the tendrils wouldn't harm you, as you're not registering as prey. Therefore I decided to test how controlly they are. And now, I know I can use them to grab things. All Might sighed. Whatever. Now come on. You don't want to be late. 2 hours later, Izuku found himself walking towards the building where the examinations would take place. I never got to try out All Might's power. He thought to himself. I absorbed his DNA, but did I get his power? He asked to himself. Deku. He turned around and saw Bakugo walking toward him, a smile on his face. Kachin. He replied. So how are you feeling? His best friend asked. Nervous. Izuku truthfully replied. Well, I know something that'll cheer you up. Muto was banned from the exam. What? Izuku stuttered out. Bakugo laughed. The bastard got drunk and tried to fight a cop. He's never going to get into UA. The two of them ignored those muttering about Bakugo. So are you gonna do your best? he asked Izuku. Izuku nodded. I'll try my hardest. His friend gave him a fist bump. Just don't try your hardest near me, okay? I'd like to not be overshadowed. Izuku chuckled. His friend ran into the building. Izuku had paused about 20 feet from the door. This is the first step towards being a hero. He put his foot forward, defying his inner doubts. And then as he brought his other foot forward he tripped on himself. Well shoot, he thought, bracing for impact. But then no impact came. His fall stopped suddenly, but there was no pain. He noticed that he was levitating. Are you alright? A cheery voice asked. Izuku slowly turned his head towards the voice and then started to flail. It was a girl. And she was talking to him. She evidently had some sort of levitation quirk. I'm sorry for using my quirk on you without permission, but it would be bad luck if you fell right. She's pretty, he thought, eyes still wide. Are you nervous? She asked. Izuku only managed to stammer awkwardly. We should do our best. See you. She waved before leaving. Izuku stood there for a few seconds. I talked to a girl. He mentally screamed. The entrance exam orientation was hosted by none other than Present Mick, a hero with a sonic quirk. Izuku didn't like sonic quirks due to the fact that Muto had one. He created a high-frequency screech that could cause several nasty side effects, although he did like Mick. He listened to his show every week. Welcome listeners to my entrance show. Everybody say hey. He was met with silence. What a refined response. He stammered out, a little embarrassed. I'll give a quick rundown on the exam. You will all be competing in mock battles in an urban setting. Each person will go to a random area. Bakugo and Izuku looked at each other's cards. So we won't be able to help our friends. Katsuki responded. Even though we're consecutive, we're in two different places. Izuku said aloud. Good luck. The Ash-on explosion user said to his friend. Perhaps we'll each get the highest scores of our respective areas. He asked. You're just glad you don't have to be near me. Izuku muttered. Is it a crime to not want to be near your quirk? It gave me a fit of phobia. And? A fear of snakes, because the tendrils sometimes move like snakes. Present Mick had gotten back on topic by now. There are 3 types of villains here. Each one has been assigned a point modifier based on difficulty. Your goal is to defeat these villains to gain points. However, unheroic acts or attacking exam takers is forbidden. I have a question. A boy shouted. Yes. Mick asked, a spotlight activating over the boy. On the printout there are 4 villains. If this is a misprint, then this skull should be ashamed of itself. He shouted in a rather rude way. And you? With the curly hair. And me? Izuku stammered, pointing at himself. Katsuki growled. Stop muttering. It's distracting. The bossy boy yelled. If you're on a pleasure trip, leave immediately. Sorry, Izuku stammered. Chuckles rose. Shut it, you bastards. Bakugo shouted. To answer your question, Mick said, the 4th type of villain is worth 0 points. It is only an obstacle to be avoided. Thank you. I apologize for the interruption. The bossy boy sat down. Muttering broke out. And finally, as a present I'll give you our school motto. Plus ultra. Izuku soon arrived at the site, along with the rest of those assigned. Alright, it's time to put the 10 months of training to the test. I'll soon become the hero I've always dreamed of being. Izuku mentally said to himself. Most of the rest of the group was muttering at the sheer size of the testing ground. It's like a city itself. They have more than one of these. Yue is amazing. Izuku was shivering, remembering the rules. Defeat as many. Hey, a familiar voice spoke out. She's here too. That girl over there is trying to focus. Why are you here? Are you here to throw off our focus? And no. Of course not. Izuku stuttered. He overheard some of the other examinees talking about how he almost tripped and how they were lucky that he was here. Lucky? I'll show you lucky when I know. No. They are not to be harmed. Izuku fought down the desire to feed. He mentally thanked All Might for the rabbits. Okay, start. Present Mick shouted over the microphone. Everyone turned, confused. What? There's no countdown in a real fight. Now get going. Huh? Izuku asked, and then he saw everyone else running towards the entrance. I'm behind already. He shouted, before activating his quirk. Using the extra power toward his muscles, he quickly caught up. He flashed back to what All Might had said about One for All. He never had a chance to take it for a test drive. Normally it'd show up in 2 to 3 hours, but you've probably already digested it. Just be prepared for the physical repercussions it'll have on your body. Huh? He had asked. When you use One for All, squeeze your buttocks and yell, from within your heart, S. Izuku was brought out of his memory when a robot appeared in front of him. A single pointer. He thought to himself. Target acquired. The robot spoke. Izuku already rushed towards it, claws out. The best bet would be to decapitate it. He thought. He pushed off of the ground and brought his claws to his neck. The head separated with a bit of resistance. Alright. That's 1 point. He thought to himself. 6 minutes and 2 seconds left. Mick shouted. It's been 4 minutes already, Izuku shouted to himself. Points, I need points fast. he said to himself as he rushed past several robot corpses. He soon entered a clearing and saw many people fighting. "T the nice girl," he said to himself. He watched as she lifted several robots up high. "Release," she shouted, causing them to drop. "Ryu. That's 28. She shouted. 28, Izuku thought to himself. And then the bossy boy appeared. Apparently he had engines in his legs. 45. He shouted. 45, Izuku spoke aloud. As he listened to the other examinees, he began to panic. The amount of enemies is decreasing fast. I need to find some. With that he forced power into his legs and took off. Meanwhile, several pro heroes were watching the prospective students fight. The examinees will have to search a large area fast. Nezu, the principal of UA, said. Therefore tracking, mobility, and attacking abilities are important. Also, the ability to stay calm is essential. These are key abilities for heroes on the streets. This year's recruits look very interesting, Vlad King said. Well, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Their true test begins now. And then he pressed a big red button. A massive explosion shook the mock city. Everyone looked towards it in shock, Izuku included. He had just managed to decapitate both heads of a three-pointer, bringing his score up to 4. It was a massive thing, easily 20 stories tall. He had a flashback to Mick's warning to avoid the zero-pointer. Isn't it a little big? He squealed in his mind. It then brought a giant fist down, owing him back. Everyone started running, completely ignoring him. The bossy boy gave him a glance before sprinting away. I'll get more points as I run, Izuku said out loud. And then those hopes were crushed. 2 minutes left, Mick shouted. 2 minutes, the last 10 months will have been wasted, he thought in despair. And then he sensed prey. Oh wow. He turned and saw the nice girl pinned under some rubby, seemingly unity to get out. He mentally squashed the desire to feed as he remembered her nice words to him. Without thinking, he rushed towards her. The pros watched in amazement, but Izuku didn't know that he was the center of the hero's attention. He felt an amazing energy rush through him. And then he leapt into the air. Clench your buttocks, and from deep within your heart, yell smash. He punched the zero-pointer in the face with a powerful right hook, his claws having reverted into hands. They outdented the robot and caused it to fall back, and tiny bits of it exploded. And then Izuku realized he was 200 feet in the air, and 3 of his limbs were broken. As he fell, he felt the intense pain. It almost made him pass out. 1 minute left. Mick shouted. I'm an idiot. 10 months is barely enough, he thought as he fell. Both my legs and my right arm are broken. If I use a smash on the ground with my left at the right time, I'll survive. However, I wouldn't be able to get any more points. And then all thoughts were stopped when the nice girl slapped his face. And then the momentum stopped in such a way that he felt nothing. She saved me again, he thought to himself. Our release, she said. He fell a meager 3 feet to the ground. This allowed him to see the second part of her quirk, her ability to barf rainbows. I am safe, he thought to himself. And she's alright. That's good. He then noticed his arms were beginning to heal. It was slow though. He estimated it would take several hours at least. I need points, he wheezed out, dragging himself forward. Time's up, Mick shouted. Izuku's eyes rolled into the back of his head and he passed out. The other candidates of City Beast started muttering about Izuku's move. They asked about the quirk and why he was so jumpy. They're all missing the point, the bossy boy thought to himself. Don't they see he did what he did to save that girl? He was aware of the remaining time and his own safety and the points he needed to pass. And he still did it anyway. If we weren't in an exam, I'd have done the same. Wait, exam? Of course, he was brought out of his musings when an old lady woke up. Good work, everyone. She then stopped at a random examinee. Have some gunnies, she said, handing set treats to the prospective student. Thanks. He stammered out, confused. A French boy held out a finger. This lady is the backbone of UA, he said. Said old lady walked up to Izuku. Oh my, your body suffered this much from your quirk? She asked. Evidently it's not used to it yet. She puckered up her lips and kissed him on the head. What? One of the examinees yelled. The French boy spoke again. That's UA's registered high school nurse, the youthful hero, recovery girl. They watched as a green glow enveloped Izuku's limbs. Her quirk causes super regeneration in those she kisses. It's the only reason exams such as this are possible. Does anyone else need healing? She asked. Meanwhile, the bossy boy was thinking. I see. So if the exam is set up like that, that means he. 1 week later. Izuku Inko asked. Her son was just staring at the fish she made. Huh. He focused back to his mother. She was a lovely lady. She hadn't changed much since he was a child. Sure, she had gained weight when he was 5, but by the time he was 7 she dropped it. You've been talking to your fish for a while. Are you alright? I am fine, he lied. Through self-scoring I knew that I passed the written exam by a good amount. However, I still only got 4 points on the practical exam. And ever since then I haven't been able to contact All Might. The results should arrive today or tomorrow, right? His mother asked. Why yeah, he said. Well, I think it's amazing that you even applied. And I know your father would be so proud of your dedication. Why yeah, he repeated. I'm glad I had the nerve to tell her about the full extent of my quirk during those 10 months. I had told Dad, but I had never gotten around to telling Mom. She'd keep it a secret, but some groups may try to target her to get to me. After all, if the government knew the full extent, they'd either hunt me down or use me as a weapon. He paused to pick up a weight. All right, I'm sorry I squandered the potential I showed, but I have no regrets. And then the door burst open. Izuku. Izuku. It came. His mother shouted. Izuku took the letter and went into his room. Izuku stared at the letter for a moment before carefully opening it. Instead of a letter, there was a metal disc. When he put the disc on the toy, it began to light up. A hologram appeared. I am here as a projection. All Might, Izuku shouted. I had to do some paperwork, so I couldn't contact you. I apologize. He bowed. Izuku was stunned. Actually, I came to this town to work at UA. All Might is working at UA, Izuku shouted to himself. All Might asked as a hand tapped him on the elbow. Wrap it up. But I have so much more to say. It's going to push everyone back. Alright. Okay, even though you passed the written exam with flying colors, I may add you only got 4 points on the practical exam. That means that you didn't pass. I already knew that. Izuku thought to himself. But it's so frustrating. That is, if that was all there was to it. Izuku looked up confused. I'm an entertainer as well. Now take a look at this video. The video showed the nice girl he saved offering to give him some of her points. Izuku was stunned. She came directly after the exam to try to negotiate on your behalf in person. This led to his staff to make a decision. You see, the practical exam is more than just defeating villains. There's another type of points. Rescue points. These are given by a panel of judges. And you, Izuku Midoriya, got 60. You are, as seen here, are in 6th place. Izuku just stared, jaw hanging low in shock, sweat beading on his head. He saw that many others, including the nice girl, had more rescue points than villain points. She had 45, placing her in 3rd. You both pass, he said. Izuku's eyes watered, almost ready to bring forth a flood. This is crazy, he muttered. Come, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. All Might calmly finished, hand outstretched. Izuku immediately reached for his phone. Dad. I got in. That's great, son. Came the response. Inko came in as well, sobbing in joy. It was times like this that they wished Hisashi was home. Hisashi put down the phone. He really wished he could be there for his family. He then scowled under his mask. His son was going to UA. As proud as he was that he was accepted, he was worried. He was afraid that Izuku would die due to a villain. He was afraid that he'd have to fight his son, especially since he was now the 9th one for all wielder. And lastly, he was afraid that his son's quirk would be seen as too villainous. The night that Izuku got this letter, All Might had contacted him. Izuku quickly sprinted to the beach. All Might. He shouted, tears in his eyes. All Might clenched his teeth, blood pouring out. Izuku didn't notice. All Might. He asked. Izuku was confused at that. And then he heard others. All Might where? Repeat after me. I'm sorry, I had the wrong person, he hissed to Izuku. He quickly realized why he said that. Wait. I had the wrong person. He shouted. He ignored the depressed mutterings. They both let out a sigh. So, congrats on passing, he told Izuku. Thank you. Izuku stuttered out. By the way, I didn't tell the school about our connection. After all, you'd probably be the first one to call that cheating. Thanks for your concern. Izuku said. I was surprised that you'd be teaching at UA though. After all, your HQ is. And stop right there. All Might sighed. Watching his air Rami like that always seemed to make his hair stand on end. I was offered the job while I was searching for a successor. My original plan was to find one among the students. Izuku nodded. That made sense. And my body broke after only one use of One for All. I can't control it. All Might turned to his heir. It can't be helped. You can't just learn like that. Izuku understood. Right now, it's either all or nothing. However, you should be able to eventually control it, so you can use what your body can handle. He turned to his muscle form, crushing a few gas canisters. Like this. Hey, it is All Might. Someone shouted. All Might paused. Time to run. He shouted. Izuku followed him, using his quirk to keep up. The time skip. When classes started, Izuku barely managed to get out the door on time. His mother was really worried about him, constantly checking his pack. His father had called over speaker as well, helping him pack by listing off what he was missing. He had that kind of memory. However, he couldn't focus on that right now. Where is it? He asked. This place is so big. And then he saw the door leading to his class. And so is the door, is it for students with enlarging quirks? He asked. Beyond this door or the elite of the hero exam, he had a picture of the bossy boy glaring, and of a cowering Kachin. He shook his head. Hopefully I'm not in the class with scary people, he said, before opening the door. Get your feet off the desk. There was the bossy kid. Eh? What was that? And there was Kachin. It's disrespectful to the makers of the desk and of the students who have sat here before. Nope. Where the hell did you come from, asshole? The explosive aunt sneered. I came from Sume Academy. My name is Tenya Iida. The glasses-wearing boy said, fist pounding his chest. Oh, you're an elite. It'll be fun watching you get kicked into the dirt. Kicked into the dirt? Do you really intend to become a hero? Then the now named Iida turned to look at him. It's you, he muttered. Now everyone else was staring at him. Oh. Gee, good morning. Izuku stuttered. Good morning. Iida shouted. I am from Sume Academy. My name is. I already heard. Izuku said, still quite flustered at the attention. I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you, Iida, he said, embarrassed. You realized that there was something more to the practical exam, didn't you? Iida asked. Huh? He asked. I had no idea, and I misjudged you. He shouted. I'd hate to admit it, but you are clearly better than I. Izuku heard Kachin mutter damned right he is. Sorry, but I didn't realize anything. Izuku deadpanned. Oh hey. It's you. Izuku turned around and saw a familiar face. It's that nice girl. As she looks great in her uniform. He thought to himself, you need to keep his eyes from wandering a little. He remembered something his father had said at that moment. Good looks are nice, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. When choosing a girlfriend, you must look at their intelligence, kindness, and moral standard. Those are the big three. He stopped zoning out when she was chanting break. 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 Well, it was thanks to you going to speak to him directly that got me the points that I needed. Huh? How did you know about that? She asked. Bakugo, meanwhile, was thinking about something. Flashback middle school. So it seems like we have 2 students going to UA. For you, Midoriya, this is nothing short of a miracle. The Quirk counselor said. Katsuki, you may go. He left but then put an ear to the door. He wished he hadn't. You Quirkless freak. How did you cheat? I didn't cheat. Izuku sobbed. Katsuki was supposed to be the first student from this school to be accepted into UA. And now you ruined the dreams of a future hero. He winced at the sound of a fist hitting flesh. Sensei, someone told me that I could become a hero. I could do it with my own effort. That's why I'm going. He backed away from the door just as his friend pushed it open, his hand holding his cheek. Katsuki glared at the counselor, before flipping him the bird. Flashback end. He snarled at the quack. And then he disappeared a few days later. The trail went cold. If I didn't know better I'd think Izuku did it, but during time period in which he vanished Izuku and I were playing video games meanwhile, the round-faced girl was still continuing to talk. I wonder if today will be more than just the orientation. Maybe we'll get to meet our teacher. Go somewhere else if you want to play at being friends. A tired voice said. Izuku looked towards the sound and saw what he first thought was a caterpillar. And then he saw the face. It looked messy. The kind girl turned, as well as Iida. This is the hero course. The zipper of the sleeping bag, Izuku's brain finally realized what it was over his shock, went down, and they saw a pair of hands holding a juice box. With a powerful slurp, the man sucked it dry. Someone's here. He thought to himself. Unknown to him, Iida and the round-faced girl thought the same thing. The man in the sleeping bag managed to lift himself up to a standing position while still in the sleeping bag. How he did so was beyond Izuku. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is limited. You're not rational enough. Izuku noticed that the man smelled strongly of cats. In his opinion, he looked like a homeless person. He must be a teacher. That must mean he's a pro-hero. Izuku thought to himself. Besides, UA's security would be to stop a predator. I'm Shota Izawa, your homeroom teacher. He droned. It's nice to meet you. Homeroom, Izuku thought to himself. The teacher grabbed what looked like a uniform from his sleeping bag. I know it's kind of rushed, but put these on and head out into the field. Ha! Most of the class said simultaneously. The Quirk assessment test. The entire class of 1 shouted at the same time. What about the entrance ceremony or orientation? The nice girl asked. If you're going to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. Their teacher said. There were very few restrictions on the teachers here. Besides, you've all been doing this since middle school, right? Sounds of agreement followed. You weren't allowed to use your quirks during those. Averages of those tests are still used here. It's irrational, and most likely due to the Ministry of Education procrastinating. Bakugo, you were the top of the practical exam. How far could you throw a softball in middle school? 67 meters, he respectfully said. Try throwing one using your quirk. The teacher monotoned. He walked up into a circle at the beginning. You may do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. As Awa flatly stated. Die. Izuku's childhood friend shouted. Die. That's Kachin. Izuku thought as they watched him use an explosive ass to send the ball flying. Know your own maximum first. That's the most rational way to form the foundations of a hero. He held up a device that read the distance the ball went. It read 705.2 meters. Whoa! The entire class shouted. Various things were said. One of the girls, who had pink skin and a set of horns, said this looks fun. That caught their teacher's attention. This looks fun. Huh. Izuku figured something bad was about to happen. You have 3 years to become a hero. Do you think that you'll have an attitude like that the whole time? A positively evil grin spit the teacher's face. Alright then. Whoever gets the last overall in all 8 tests gets expelled. A panic yell rang out through the class. Expulsion for the one in last place. This is bad. I can only use one for all at 100% or 0%. I'll have to use my quirk, and who knows what'll happen. We're free to do what we want as teachers, as I've mentioned. Aizawa said, holding his hair up. Welcome to UA's hero course. Last place will be expelled, but it's only the first day. No, any expulsion for getting last would be too cruel. The nice girl said. Natural disasters, big accidents, and selfish villains. Each of these can end the career or the life of a hero. Now, the real tests begin. The first test was a 50-meter dash. Iida got 3.04 seconds due to the fact that his quirk was built for speed. He was by far one of the fastest. Izuku managed to get 4.67 seconds due to his quirk. Kasuki got 4.13 seconds. At the very least I can outrun Izuku. But his quirk isn't evolving. He thought to himself. The second test was grip. Izuku remembered All Might's words on All for One and his own personal analogy. However, he knew that he had a good quirk for this sort of thing, so he should use that. It didn't break his body. He got 300 kilograms. The third test was a standing long jump. After his childhood friend used his explosions to fly, Izuku decided to force his quirk down into his muscles. When he started feeling pain, he released them. He got a pretty good score. The fourth test was repeated side steps. No one could compete with the guy with the bouncy balls for hair. And then came the ball throw. The nice girl, whose name was apparently Uraka Chako, threw her ball before him. She used her quirk and let it fly. After about 4 minutes, Aizawa held up the screen. It had an infinity symbol. Izuku started to panic. Everyone's had an amazing score at least once. I've been in the top, sure, but not the best at any. It's now or never. It doesn't look good for Midori right now, Iida said. Hey, watch it. He's still doing great. Kasuki shouted. Then why hasn't he done the thing he did with the giant robot? So that's it, their teacher thought. Meanwhile, Izuku was running through all of the compliments about his future. They came from All Might, his mother, and his father. I'll definitely become a hero. He mentally screamed, one for all building up. He didn't notice his teacher's eyes glowing red. He did notice the fact that both one for all and his other quirk went dead. Izuku felt physically weak. It was like he would pass out. And then the ball landed. Only 46 meters. He thought, mentally calculating the distance. And then a robotic voice confirmed it. What happened? He thought to himself. I was definitely trying to use it, he said to himself. I erased your quirk. His teacher droned. The entrance exam is irrational. After all, a kid like you got in. Izuku paled, and then he saw something. Those goggles. I see. You're Eraserhead, an underground hero. Underground heroes didn't get paid. His father had called them the real heroes. He had said that the pro heroes may be overrated besides All Might, but the underground ones, those that voluntarily refuse payment or fame, were the true heroes. I can tell you can't control your quirk, the underground hero said. Do you intend to become incapacitated every time you try to save someone? That's not my intention. He was then grabbed by the scarves that the underground hero wore, and they pulled him in. Whatever your intention, I'm saying that's what everyone around you will be forced to do. Izuku gasped, his sight flickering in and out. There was once an oppressively happy hero who saved over 1,000 people single-handedly. You'd break your body when trying to save one. By now, his vision was almost gone. With your power, you can't become a hero. He then mercifully closed his eyes and let him go. Izuku collapsed to the ground, panting. I've returned your quirk. I'll give you another chance at the ball throw. Now get it over with. The other students started to mutter to themselves as Izuku hauled himself to his feet and got into the circle. What should I do? He said to himself. Will he prepare for an Hinori defeat here, or will he be intimidated into last place? Eraserhead thought to himself as he applied eye droplets. Either way, he has no potential. Izuku wound up his arm. It's just like he said. If I keep breaking my body, then I have 0 chance of being a hero. Smash. He shouted, forcing both his quirk and one for all into his index finger. The ball flew incredibly high, and eventually came to a stop. The screen read 7,053 meters. That's over 7 kilometers. What did he do? Eraserhead thought to himself. Sensei Izuku ground out. He clenched his hand, showing that only one of his fingers was broken. I can still move. This kid, Eraserhead chuckled. He got over 7,000 meters. Someone yelled. Yes. A hero-like record. Uraka cheered, happy for her classmate. He had a strange quirk in the entrance exam, and it seemed to cause his limbs to swell up as well, Iida said. It's not very stylish, Yuga said. Katsuki was smirking. Suck on that, you extras. He thought back to the teachers and students in both elementary and middle school. Wherever they are, I hope they're upset. League of Villain Base. All for one relished in the screams of the school guidance counselor who dared to lay a finger on his precious son. He had been torturing him for weeks. Every scream was music to his ears. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end sooner or later. Now then, I tire of you. Your quirk of calming people isn't useful to what I have planned. Therefore, it is time for you to die. He called into Mera, his student, and villainly. Please touch all 5 fingers of your left hand on what remains of his left foot. He asked. Yes, sensei. The man-child stated through the radio. His quirk causes matter to disintegrate when he touches something with all 5 fingers of one of his hands, all for one, then radioed him again. Make sure to make it as slow as possible. Back to you, eh? Is your finger alright? Uraraka asked. Yeah, Izuku said. Bullshit, Deku. It's broken. Bakugo shouted. Idle heal. I heal fast. And that's another thing about that quirk, he thought to himself. Flashback, just a few days after Izuku's quirk manifested. Your quirk's so cool, Kachin. I wish mine was too. The 4-year-old Katsuki turned. Your quirk scares the hell out of me, Deku. It's already better than mine. That brought Izuku up short. It's as scary. His friend whimpered. Don't worry. It's not nearly as scary as your dad when he's angry. Flashback end. Izuku fought through the pain in the next few exercises. By the final one, however, his finger was back to normal. That didn't take long. Maybe it's because of the size of the wound. After all of the tests were done, Aizawa had them all stand in front of him. Alright, time for your test scores. It's too much of a hassle to explain one at a time, so they'll all be shown at once. Izuku noticed that he got 14th place. Oh, thank goodness. He thought. Last place went to someone named Toru. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion thing. Their teacher said as he turned off the hologram. Stunned silence resulted. It was a rational threat to draw out the maximum power of your quirks. He said, smiling in a creepy way. We're done here. There are handouts with information back in the classroom. He said in a monotone while walking away. Oh, Midoriya, have the nurse fix your fin. She stopped when Izuku held up his, now fully healed, finger. I heal fast, sensei. It's part of my quirk. He nodded. Very well. Aizawa turned when he heard a familiar voice. Aizawa, you liar. So you were watching All Might? He asked. Do you have too much time on your hands? He mentally chuckled at the joke. That's mean. It's just as mean as your lie about expulsion. After all, you completely cut out last year's class for not having potential. Obviously you think this whole class has potential, especially the potential of the green-haired kid. You seem to be supporting him quite a bit. Now, I don't know why, but a teacher shouldn't show favorites. And I didn't expel him because he had more than 0 potential. That's it. I'm so hungry, Izuku muttered to himself, plodding along. Healing his wounds had made his quirk desire more food, so he wanted to get home and eat something his mother made. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder, and had to mentally fight down the tendrils. I originally thought that Mr. Aizawa was one of the best heroes, since he's going to be teaching us. However, I don't think a teacher should lie. I see. Eid is not scary. He's just earnest. Hey. Wait up. You're going to the station, right? Hey, you're the Infinity Girl, Ida said. My name is Uraraka Chako. She replied. You're Ida Tenya, and you're Deku Midori, right? Deku Izuku shouted out loud. Huh? But that's what that explosion boy called you, right? She asked. That's his nickname for me. It's based on a different way of writing my name. In return, I get to call him Kachin. My real first name is Izuku. Izuku said. Oh, I'm sorry. Although it sounds a bit like the word for you can do it. Izuku ushed. I think that's what he means. We've been friends since we were little, Izuku stammered. Boy. Wait up. And speak of the devil and he shall appear. Kachin. Izuku shouted. Wanna walk with us? Uraraka asked. Sure. The envoy said. You seem more civil. Ida said. Hey. I can be friendly. He screamed. Ah. There it is. Uraraka chuckled. Why you? Izuku laughed, the hunger now pushed to the back of his mind. The curriculum of UA was different than most schools. For example, there was English, which was taught by President Mick. And then there was lunch. The cafeteria served gourmet food for incredibly low prices. Izuku had to physically restrain himself from geeking out over Lunch Rush, the teacher and pro hero who ran the cafeteria. And then, in the afternoon they had basic hero training. Izuku sat down for the first hero class. I'm everyone turned to see coming through the door like a normal person. It's All Might. Wow, he really is a teacher. That's his Silver Age style. This is giving me goosebumps. I teach basic hero training. It's how you all train in basic heroic lessons. And today, we will be doing combat training. Izuku paled while Bakugo gave a grin. And that's not all. He said, pointing to a wall. The wall split, revealing several panels. Each one had a number. These are your hero costumes. Each one was designed based on your preferences. Costumes. Izuku murmured to himself. Now then, get changed and head to training ground beta. They say the clothes make the man, ladies and gentlemen. Be aware for now on you are heroes. He took a look around. You all look amazing. Now then, follow me. Flashback. Izuku was panicking. He had the costume we wanted planned out, but he needed to register his quirk. I'm already registered as none, as my quirk came the night after I was sent to the doctor, he said to himself. He then proceeded to call All Might. Why you can? All Might chuckled. Your quirks are examined throughout your whole career. Speaking of that, why was your quirk never registered? They only looked for the extra toe joint. There was a silence. That's it. Izuku held the phone away from his ear. I know that isn't the end of it. After all, my dad has the extra joint, but he still has his quirk. Anyways, sometimes people learn new things about their quirks, and thus they're allowed to update them. Izuku nodded. Thank you so much. They probably won't accept outrageous changes, but if you were listed as quirkless, you'd probably be fine. Thanks. He hung up and then called his father. Hey dad. I'm going to the city hall to update my quirk status. Izuku heard his father chuckle. It's about time. I'm glad my company looks beyond the toe joint. Yeah. All Might agreed as well. His father snorted. What should I call it? He asked. Well, I have an idea. It's from an old video game I liked to play as a child, and one that's still relevant today. Let's call it Blacklight. Flashback end. Deku. You're Raka. And then he noticed her outfit. I like your costume. It's really down to earth, she said, before looking at her own. I should have filled out a design though. It's just a skin-tight bodysuit, she muttered. A nasally voice piped up. This hero course is the best. Meanwhile, All Might took a look at Izuku's costume. It had several Natisei features. That's so obvious, he thought. Alright. It's time for combat training. Sensei. Izuku noticed that the suit of armor was Iida. He looked cool. Will we be trying out urban combat again? All Might shook his head. I'm 2 steps ahead of you. While most villain battles happen outside, the worst villains will retreat indoors. Therefore, we will be working on internal battles. The class shall be split into teams of 2. 2 teams will fight. One will be heroes and the other will be villains. One of Izuku's classmates, Sayu if he remembered correctly, asked without basic training. All Might laughed. We are doing this to teach you the basics. This is no fight against robots you can beat up. You'll be fighting each other. Immediately questions started pouting in. What determines victory? Can we still beat people up? Will the punishment for failure be expulsion? How will we be split up? Isn't this cake wonderful? All Might grumbled. I shall answer all of your questions. He pulled out a booklet. A script. Izuku shouted. The villains have a 5-story building as their lair and have a nuclear weapon hidden there. The heroes are trying to disarm it. The heroes have to get to the device or capture the villains within an allotted time limit. The villains need to protect the nuke. They will also win if they manage to catch both of the heroes. Teams will be decided by drawing lots. Teams are decided that haphazardly, Iida shouted. Pros need to work with whoever they can, and that's usually random. Maybe that's why. Izuku asked. I see. I apologize for my rudeness. It's okay. Now let's get started. Izuku got the first pick of the names. Now, I wonder who I'll be with, he thought as he grabbed a name. Well, that makes things interesting, he thought. Team is Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. At this, Katsuki collapsed and let out a squeaking sound. That is disrespectful towards your teammate, Iida shouted. Hey. I'm just relieved at my pickings. We're gonna win. I got the most powerful out of all of us as our ally. That stunned everyone. More powerful than you? Yuga asked. The rest of the students expected the explosive on to cuss, but instead they saw him nod. Trust me, his quirk is the second scariest thing you'll ever see. And the first, Yuga mocked. Izuku's father when he's angry. Bakugo finished. Izuku chuckled. You're still afraid of my dad, Kachin. Of course. You saw the look of murder in his eyes when Dokite-sensei said to his face that you were nothing but trash. He looked like he was restraining himself from killing him right there. And I swear I heard him repeating I can't kill him yet. All Might looked a little pale at that. Well, next. The teams were interesting. Iida was with Uraraka, Yuga was with Mina, and there seemed to be a strange pattern towards it, but Izuku just couldn't put his finger on it. And the first 2 teams fighting will be All Might said as he rustled through the boxes. Team as heroes and Team D as villains. Everyone else please head to the monitor room. As everyone left, Izuku turned to look at his teammate. Kachin was giving him a look of determination. Izuku managed to stop his hands from shaking and returned the look with a look of his own. Kachin looked surprised before a smirk settled on his face. The villain team will have 5 minutes to set up. After that the hero team will enter and the battle will start. All Might instructed. Yes, sir. All 4 students said. Young Iida. Young Uraraka. Learn to think from the perspective of villains. This is pretty close to the real thing. Go all out. Don't be afraid to get hurt. From beside Izuku, Bakugo leaned into Izuku's ear. Please don't. He asked of his friend. Izuku looked insulted. Like I would do that, he said. Unfortunately Iida heard him. If things go too far, I will stop it. Both Izuku and his friend breathed a sigh of relief. Even if this is training, it pains me to play a villain, Iida said to his partner. So our job is to protect this thing? He asked, pounding on it. I see. It's paper match. Hey, Iida. How do you think we'll do? Uraraka asked her partner. Well, we're up against Bakugo, so he'll probably want to dive in head first. I do believe you can counteract that. And Izuku? She asked. He mentioned that it would be foolish if he went all out. I wonder why that is. Iida said, hand on his chin. Because he breaks his bones if he does. Uraraka replied. His friend seemed nervous about the possibility of him going all out. Was he worried about Izuku's health? Meanwhile, Izuku and Katsuki were trying to memorize the floor plan. Wow, this is tough, the explosive teen said to his friend. He knew that memorizing floor plans would be difficult. At least there's no worry about expulsion, so we can relax. What the fuck, Deku? The last part was because his friend was a nervous wreck. It's just we're up against friends, and I don't want to hurt them. What if I lose control? What if the scent of oud makes me go crazy? What if? Bakugo slapped his friend with the back of his hand. Stop whining, damn it, he shouted. He then took a deep breath. Come on, Deku, you're not going to lose control. If Muto didn't end up devoured, then they won't. He laughed. He knew his friend had enough self-control. Why, yeah, I guess. But still, we're up against Iida and Uraraka. We'll have to be on our guard. Katsuki nodded. We'll have to look up, he summarized. Alright, the 5 minutes are up. It's time to start, All Might announced. Meanwhile, inside the observation room, All Might spoke to the students. Now then, everyone, you should all think about what's going on as well. Izuku and Bakugo decided to go through a window on the second floor. Good boy. That was intense, Bakugo said. Izuku had activated his quirk, grabbed Bakugo in a fireman's carry and jumped onto the ledge. He had then proceeded to hang on while his friend opened the window. Be careful. There are a lot of in spots. Izuku whispered. You're the nerd. What next? Katsuki asked. Keep looking up, Izuku said. I can't control one for all, and I don't want to risk using Blacklight, as it might just kill Iida and Uraraka. So Deku, did you ever write anything on indoor battles in your notebooks? His friend asked. Yes, and I'm trying to remember them, he replied. And then he heard the sound of a motor. Get down, he yelled, dragging his friend to the floor just before the wall caved in due to a kick from Iida. Are you alright? Izuku asked his friend. Yeah. I'll go on ahead. You handle Iida. With that, Katsuki used a hole in the wall and started searching a little more aggressively. Meanwhile, Iida got back up. I have found you pesky heroes. You will not stop my evil plot. Izuku punched him in the gut. Word of advice, talking isn't a free action. His father had drummed that into his head when he said he wanted to be a hero. Another explosion rang out as Bakugo went through another wall. Surrender and you will be destroyed painlessly. And then Izuku kicked him in the chest, exactly where he had punched him. Are we going to monologue or fight? He shouted. As he was fighting Iida, Izuku was thinking about growing up with Kachin living close by. We lived in the same neighborhood, so we knew each other before we got our quirks. He was a leader of several of the kids. Good or bad, he was always confident unless it involved anything to do with my dad. The only person Kachin was afraid of, with the posse exception of him, was Izuku's father. Izuku was pretty sure that his dad was the main factor of the two of them staying friends. After all, Kachin swore that his dad had to have been a villain before meeting his mom, because according to him, no one should have an evil glare as powerful as his. And then Iida decided to try to roundhouse him. Izuku crouched, avoiding the kick. Meanwhile, All Might had just finished the description of the capture tape. Man, Izuku's doing so well. He's going against a guy who placed second without using his quirk, someone said. I see. He's really good at observation. I remember reading some of his notes. His fanboyish tendencies are paying off, All Might thought to himself. Izuku knew he needed to buy Kakin some time, so he activated his quirk to sprint around a corner. Alright, Iida will probably follow me. After all, he knows that chasing Kachin wouldn't be a good idea. Like him, Kachin is best suited for close-range fighting, and he got first place in the entrance exam. While Iida got second place, he probably thinks that Kachin's explosions will get to him before he could subdue him. Meanwhile, Bakugo used a door off of its hinges to get to the stairwell. Alright, Deku should have things under control. Now all I need to do is find Round Face and take her out. Then I have to touch the nuke and we win. He primed his hands and used his explosions to propel himself up the stairs. He thought back to how, during preschool, he thought he was the best. Hisashi put a stop to that. Flashback. Deku. Where are you? A 4-year-old Katsuki shouted. No response. Stop hiding, you wimp, he screamed. It was in the afternoon and the nerd wasn't following him. He was supposed to praise him. Deku. He shouted, tiny pops going off. Now, there's no reason for that. Katsuki turned and saw Deku's loser father. He only had a fire-breathing quirk. Hey, Dragon breathe. Where's your shitty son? He shouted, finger pointed at the man. Is that really the way you talk to your friends? Hisashi Midoriya asked. Deku's nothing to me. He's just useless quirkless fool playing at wanting to be a hero. That was the worst thing he could have said. Hisashi's face turned into a furious snarl. And then he had this presence. It was only for a microsecond, but Katsuki felt like death itself was glaring down upon him, ready to end his life. The man grabbed him by the shirt and hoisted him into the air, eye to eye with him. Let me go. Katsuki screamed, using his quirk. The man didn't flinch. I'll have you know that my brother was quirkless, the man said, his tone neutral. Bakugo saw right through it. The look promised pain. It promised an unholy demise. He wanted to be a hero, too. And do you know what happened? He got his wish. Hisashi's teeth were clenched. He became the world's greatest hero at the time. And then he died a hero. So, when you grind those without a quirk into the ground, most of me is begging you to continue, so I can make you live that nightmare, he snarled. And in that moment, Katsuki believed him. He believed that Izuku's dad could and would take his quirk away if he continued being a bully. Remember this talk, Katsuki, he spat the name like a curse. Because if this happens again, I won't give you another warning. He then proceeded to drop him to the ground. Now go apologize. Flashback end. Katsuki knew another hole in the wall. And then came that day, he thought. The day when Izuku showed what he could do. When he proved me wrong. He was just a late humor. And then, the very next day after that. Flashback. Did you hear? Deku doesn't have a quirk. The preschoolers were gathered around the nearly catatonic Izuku. Katsuki was further away, still terrified of what had happened the previous night. What? That's posse. Yeah, it's called being quirkless. That's so lame. He turned to his friend. Katsuki growled at the other preschoolers. You're wrong. I know it. He shouted. His teacher chuckled. I know you're trying to support your friend Katsuki, but there's no reason to get his hopes up like that. After all, according to the medical records he has an extra toe joint. Chuckles erupted. His dad has one too and he breathes fire. Was his response. His teacher laughed. He's proba white trying to make his son feel better. It's a wasted effort if you ask me. A few days later, he was leading his friends through the forest when he slipped on a log and fell into the river. And then Deku came there offering his hand. He really didn't want to take it, fearing that those awful tendrils would appear. And he was shaking, obviously afraid that they would as well. Kei-Kachin. Hey, are you alright? He asked. Now, Katsuki was tempted to slap the hand away, but he remembered the warning Izuku's dad had told him. So he swallowed his pride and accepted it. Flashback end. It was a damn good thing I did, he thought to himself. And then he turned a corner, feeling too happy in memory lane to explode the wall. And there it was. He saw the nuke. Your rock. He proceeded to lift his hand up and out up the debris that she would have brought down on him. Meanwhile Izuku ducked from another kick from the now maniacally laughing Iida. He's really getting into the role. Izuku thought to himself, before activating his quirk again and running around another corner. You cannot run from me, Izuku. My quirk is based on speed and stamina. You will tire, and you will be caught. Bwahahaha. His actions were causing Izuku to sweat drop. Man, this guy's acting like those villains from Dad's old movies. He ran through the maze-like area. Kachin. How are things going? Not well, came the response. Your rock littered the floor with debris. Shit. Kachin, hold on. I'm coming. You won't be going anywhere. Iida shouted, sprinting around the corner. Izuku then proceeded to duck, only to get a facetful of Iida's boot. So what now, little hero? He sneered. Deku. I heard that through the radio. Kick his ass and get up here. But I might kill him. Izuku cried out. Then focus on the kicking of his ass, not the eating of his ass. That gave Iida pause. What? He stammered. Izuku saw what was going on, so he dashed towards his friend, claws out. What are those? Iida shouted, hands up to instinctively protect his face. Izuku then swiftly brought out the capture tape and wrapped it around Iida. You lose, he deadpanned to his friend before rushing off. In the monitor room, All Might almost had a heart attack. That face. That tone. I had so similar to his face and tone. Izuku sprinted to the stairs, following the estate walls. I don't have much time, he thought. Kachin, I'm coming. He shouted into the radio. Good, was the response. Izuku coiled his legs and leapt through the stairwell, arriving at the scene. Uraraka paled at the sight of the claws. What? That's not part of your quirk, she shouted. Izuku rushed at her, eyes dead. Those eyes. And no way. Toshinori mentally screamed. Was there a connection? There had to be one. The Uraraka dive rolled out of Izuku's way, the claws missing her by inches. Got it. And then she saw that Bakugo managed to grab the nuke. The hero team wins. All Might yelled over the radio. As the two teams came out, Iida decided to catch up to Bakugo and Izuku. Eat my ass, where did that come from? Katsuki shrugged. It's not my place to say. Don't worry, neither of us swing that way. After all, robots aren't sexy. Izuku snorted at that. Our robot Ida shouted. Izuku giggled aloud at his reaction. I am a flesh-nude human being. Ida shouted, waving his arms around. And yet you literally have 2 engines. Bakugo chucked. That's my quirk. He shouted. Relax man, I'm messing with you. The explosive teen said. Alright. The MVP was none other than Katsuki Bakugo. That stunned everyone, said Boy included. What? Was all he could say. Would anyone like to guess why? Momo raised her hand. Yes. He asked. Well, Bakugo was the one who actually got the weapon, and he clearly followed through on his part of the plan. Sure, Izuku came up with it, but he also seemed to be the one to get Izuku to capture Ida with that line of his. The class laughed. I'm never gonna live that down, am I? Katsuki asked. Nope. The entire class shouted. Now then, let us move locations and choose the next team match. Shoto single-handedly swept the floor with his ice. He froze the entire building and casually tapped the nuke. The villain team's feet were frozen to the floor. Team C lost to Team H due to the fact that only one member of the team took it seriously. The other was Mineta. He was paired with the girl with the skimpy outfit. What would you expect? The other teams did well, and soon it was over. Well done everyone. No one was injured, although young Bakugo may have made our ears eat with his words. Everyone laughed while Set Boy screamed in rage. But now I must go. See you. And then he took off running. Wow. All Might's amazing. But I wonder why he was leaving so quickly. Izuku was pretty sure it was because of the time limit, but he didn't say anything. The rest of the afternoon classes went well. Izuku briefly wondered what would have happened if he used one for all, but decided it wasn't good to dwell on it. At best he'd have a broken arm. At worst he would have killed Ida. He went home with them, and they all laughed at what Bakugo said, Katsuki included. Izuku thought that they were expecting him to go off. He knew that Kachin could keep his temper in, but it was hard. The school was surrounded by reporters the next day. Izuku just stared in shock. What's All Might like as a teacher? One lady asked. How are his classes? What does he teach? These questions were asked to everyone the reporters could get to. Hey, aren't you the boy the sludge villain captured? One of them asked Bakugo. Fuck off. He snarled. And finally Izawa came out. What's All Might like as a teacher? The main reporter asked. Wow, you're really scruffy, what's your deal? All Might is not on duty today. He droned. You are disturbing the classes. Please leave. He waved his hand at her in a shooing way. He then turned around, ignoring the reporters. How in the world did All Might work as a hero with these reporters? Was it his tour in the American Republic? Hey. At least let us see All Might. The nosy reporter demanded. Wait. No. Stop. Another reporter shouted. And then a deep alarm went off and steel barricades went up around the school, making the nosy reporter scream and fall back. It's the UA barrier. The what? The nosy reporter asked, still furious at her humiliation. That's what we call it. Anyone without a student pass or an ID is trying to get their causes to rise. That's stupid. We're the press. We deserve to get in. She sneakily said. Yeah. We've been here for 2 days. Another reporter shouted. Izawa walked into homeroom. Good job on your first combat training. I saw the results in video form. I must say, you surprised me, Bakugo. Hey. I got first place in the entrance exam. It's only natural I got MVP. He bragged. No, I meant what you said to your teammate. Laughter erupted. Shut the fuck up. The on-teen screeched, explosions going off on his palms. And Midoriya, I see that you decided breaking an arm wasn't healthy. Although your quirk is a strength enhancer, you grew claws. Care to explain? Izawa asked. And my quirk had that, but I didn't know it. I couldn't grow claws until about 10 months ago. Does his quirk grow stronger the more people he kills? If so, thank God he wants to be like All Might, Katsuki thought to himself. Sorry about that. Now, let's get on to homeroom business. I'll have you all, he paused. Are we taking another surprise test? The entire class thought to themselves. Choose a class representative. It's an actually normal thing. The entire class thought, obviously relieved. And then came the constant screams of people wanting to be the one to lead the class. In a normal class, no one would want the extra work. Here, however, the person chosen gets to practice their leadership skills, which are essential for pro heroes, Izuku thought to himself, ignoring Mineta, promising that under his rule, girls would have to show 30 centimeters of thigh. Silence please. Ida shouted. Everyone turned to look at him. It is a serious responsibility to hold this position. It isn't a job for anyone who wants to do it. It is a calling that requires the trust of those around you. If we want to use democracy to choose, then we shall hold an election to choose one. We haven't even known each other for that long. Sayu said. If that's the case, everyone will just vote for themselves. Karishma added on. Hence the voting. If someone gets more votes, then they're obviously suited. What do you think, sensei? Everyone turned to Izawa and saw that he was already in his sleeping bag. I don't care, so long as it's done before the end of homeroom. He said in his usual monotone. And the results were I got first. Izuku screamed. Alright Deku. Bakugo shouted, laughing. Did you vote for him? Kyoka asked. Hell yeah I did. Deku's a genius and he knows how to be charismatic. Thanks Kachin. Izuku said, still nervous. Alright, Izuku is the class representative, and the deputy class representative will be Momo. Aizawa tiredly stated, before retracting behind his desk. At lunch, Izuku was still panicking. I don't think I'm worthy of the job. I don't think I'm qualified. Ida then spoke up. Your courage and good judgment at critical moments makes others want to follow you. Thanks Ida. Izuku replied, flustered at the compliment. It's why I voted for you. He said. Why you were one of the people who voted for me. But Ida, I thought you wanted the job. Uraraka responded. There's a difference between wanting the job and being Saida for it. He replied. You know, you talk like a rich person. Are you rich? Uraraka asked. Ida sighed. I tried changing my way of talking to avoid the fine. Yes, my family is rich. We've been heroes for generations. I'm the younger brother. Do you know the turbo hero Ingenium? Of course. Izuku replied almost immediately. He's a really popular hero with 65 sidekicks. At 65 Uraraka sputtered. Wait as Izuku began. He is my older brother. Ida said, standing up. He is a Likia hero who follows the rules and sets an example. He sat down. I set my sights on being a hero so I could be like my brother. However, I'm not ready to lead just yet. Midoriya, meanwhile, realized the hidden meaning of the practical exam, so he's clearly a better leader. I already said I didn't know. Izuku muttered. You know, I think this is the first time I've seen you smile. Ida. Uraraka said. What? I smile. Ida replied. So Ingenium is Ida's role model, like All Might is mine. Izuku thought to himself. League of Villains base. All for One suddenly clutched his chest. Sensei. Kogori shouted. I'm fine. Why did it feel like I just got punched in the heart? He thought to himself. UA cafeteria. And then an alarm aired. What? Izuku shouted. The level 3 alert has been issued. All students, please evacuate outdoors. An automated voice declared. What's a level 3 alert? Ida asked the boy sitting next to him. It means someone is trespassing on school grounds. The boy replied. I've been here for 3 years and I've never seen anything like it. The hallways were so crowded that everyone was pushed against each other. What's with all the people? Uraraka shouted. As expected of the students of the best hero high school, everyone is quickly reacting to a crisis. Ida shouted. Izuku felt all of the warm bodies around him and once again forced the rising tendrils down. They're reacting so quickly it's causing a panic. He shouted. And then he was pushed down. Deku. Uraraka screamed. Ida then shoved himself to the window. Who in the world dared to trespass? He shouted, looking down. And then he saw it. The press. Give us All Might. The pushy reporter lady screeched. Aizawa and Mick were by the front doors. We already told you that he's not here today. Mick responded. If you'll give us one comment we'll leave. Another reporter shouted. If you people get one comment, you'll demand another. That's how you meaty types are, Aizawa said, hands raised. Mick then leaned towards Aizawa. They're illegally trespassing. Do you think we can get away with calling them villains and then beating them up? He whispered. Don't do that, Mick. They'll write a bunch of half-truths or outright lies for daring to not submit to their every desire. He deadpanned. Let's just wait for the police. I thought we were under attack, but it's just the press. Ida thought to himself. Everyone. It's just a prey. And then someone elbowed him, knocking him down. Did someone fall? A random student yelled. That caused even more panic. Where are the teachers? Ida thought to himself. Are they just trying to keep the press out? Everyone. Slow down. Slow Duok. Kirishima and Kaminari. He thought to himself, watching them try to calm the students down, only to be swept away by the tide of bodies. Ida. Uraraka shouted, being pushed away from him. Think. What would Midori or my brother do? That's it. He then pushed his way through the crowd. Uraraka. Make me float. He shouted. She reached out and just barely managed to touch him. And sure enough, he was floating. Now to get to everyone's line of sight. He then pushed his engines out of his legs and started them. Of course, being in zero gravity, he started cartwheeling towards the front. Ida. Izuku shouted. Ida then crashed into the wall. Alright. Be concise, clear and bold. He thought to himself. He then grabbed the bar above him. Everyone. He shouted, getting the attention of everyone. It's just the press. This is UA. Let's act in a way that is benefiting to the best of the best. And then the shoving stopped. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief and then noticed that his shirt had an indent in it. He almost panicked before reabsorbing the tendril. That was way too close. He thought to himself. Back at 1A, Izuku was about to give a speech. Come on class rep, show us what you're made of. Momo encouraged. Well, it's time to appoint other positions, but first see, can I say something? He asked. I think that Iida should be the class representative. Everyone looked up at that. He was eager to get everyone's attention today. Therefore, I think it's best that he be the one representing us. And soon the class was agreeing on it. I don't care what you do, Izuku eat to the sound of his teacher back in his sleeping bag talking. Just finished it up quickly. He then fell back asleep. Iida then stood up. If the class representative has nominated me, then it can't be helped. From this day forward, I, Tenyu Iida, promise to carry out my duties as class representative to the best of my abilities. What about me? Momo asked. After school was out, midnight, Recovery Girl, 13, and Nezu went to the front gate, only to find it utterly destroyed. The press wouldn't be Iida to do this, Nezu said. There had to be an instigator. Did a villain slip in, or was it a declaration of war? Meanwhile, Mount Lady, Kamui Woods, and another hero were in a standoff with a villain holding a family hostage. Misery smash. And then All Might appeared. He backhanded the villain. I was on my way to work, but I can't ignore any screams for help. Ah! A hit and run. Someone shouted. I will be going now. With that he took to the air in a mighty leap. I'm going slower. Is it because I gave one for all to young Midoriya? And after I pushed myself that day, my time has begun to decrease. Even if he's a Suida vessel, he's only 15. And he looks way too much like him to have it be a coincidence, but that's what has to be. Today's hero class will be taught by 3 teachers, All Might, myself and another hero. Another. Izuku thought to himself. What will we be doing? Zero asked. Rescue missions. From shipwrecks, natural disasters and everything in between. Rescue missions, huh? This sounds even more difficult. Kaminari stated, obviously excited for the challenge. Hey. This is serious. Karishma stated. No one's better than me in the water, Ribbit. Sayu added. I'm not done yet. As always said. Everyone turned to him again. You can decide whether or not you want to bring your costumes. He pressed a button on a remote and the costume holders appeared. Also, this takes place off campus, so we'll be taking the bus for this. He then got up. Rescue training. This is the part I admired. This is a huge step in becoming a hero. Izuku thought to himself, fighting the urge to remind himself why surrounding himself with weak or injured people was a very bad idea. The class was soon dressed and ready. Hey Deku, why are you in your gym clothes? Uraraka asked. My costume is being updated. You see, my dad told me that I should be my own hero, instead of an All Might clone. Bakugo, who was right behind them, nodded. You need to do your own thing, Deku, or you're just gonna be All Might 2.0. He laughed. And then Ida a whistle he found from somewhere. All right, students of 1A, gather around. Form 2 lines based on your student number, so that loading onto the bus goes smoothly. Ida's going full throttle, Izuku said while sweat dropping. As it turned out, it was more like a Puik bus than a school bus. I didn't think it was this type of bus. Ida shouted. So there was no point to all of that. Mina said. I just say whatever comes to mind, Sayu said. Midoriya. Why yes, Ase, he was rather startled by the fact someone was talking to him. Call me Tsu, she said. Alright. He mummed. Your Quirk is a lot like All Might's. Ha. He cried, trying to get them to not make the connection. But he wasn't really getting any traction. Hold up, Tsu. All Might doesn't get claws with his Quirk. Karishma admonished. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. He also thought that he might need to train one for all some more. After all, his fingers healed quickly, so he practiced on that. Hey, it's cool that you have such a flashy Quirk. My Quirk, Hardening, is super useful, but it doesn't look like much. I think it's a great Quirk. It's definitely pro level. Izuku replied. But a hero has to deal with popularity as well. Karishma countered. My naval laser is pro level in both flashiness and strength. Yuga said. But it's not great that it gives you a stomachache, Mina deadpanned. But if you're talking about flashy or strong, then you have to look at Bakugo or Todoroki. Karishma finished. Bakugo's always mad though, so it's not like he'll ever be popular. Sayu said. Hey. You wanna fight? Said boy screamed, proving the point. See? We haven't even known each other for long, so it's amazing that everyone knows his personality is like crap seeped in sewage. Kaminari stated. I'll kill you. The explosive Ond yelled, again proving the point. How is this posse? Kachin's the one who's being teased. Izuku thought to himself. What a vulgar conversation, Momo said to Uraraka. But I like this kind of stuff. Uraraka replied. Alright, we're here. Stop fooling around. As always said. Everyone, I have been waiting for you. The whole class collectively inhaled. It's 13, the space hero. The gentlemanly hero who has saved tons of people from disasters. Izuku fanboyed. I love 13. Uraraka squealed. Ah, I bet you don't even know their gender. Ida scoffed. That was a tricky question. No one had ever seen 13 out of their suit except for. 13 is a girl. Izuku shouted. How did you know that? 13 asked. Your voice for one. It's feminine. Also, you're not denying that it is. Also when I saw you save a bunch of people once, you mentioned getting a new suit to accommodate your hips, and you were in a man's suit. Therefore, since women tend to have larger hips for giving birth, I assumed you are a woman. There was stunned silence. And then 13 laughed. You're correct. I am a girl, she said. Now let's get inside without further delay. We all look forward to working with you, the class shouted. Everyone gasped when they got in. There are many zones here. There's a shipwreck, a landslide, a fire, a windstorm and more. 13 declared. I made this training ground to accommodate for various types of natural disasters. It's called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short, she finished. 13, where's All Might? Aizawa asked. He was supposed to meet us here. Well, it looks like he did too much hero work and ran out of time. So he's in the lounge, she whispered, holding up 3 fingers. Aizawa then called All Might. I'm sorry. I should have a little bit of energy for the end though. Well, that's irrational, Aizawa said. Good thing we took precautions just in case, he thought to himself. It can't be helped. Shall we begin? Before we begin let me say a few things, 13 said. I am sure you are all aware of my quirk, Akhul. I can suck up anything and turn it to dust. In fact, she's Probawaya Akhul herself, save for the fact she can turn back to normal, Izuku thought. I think that's the case because she can take off her suit, as this one is different than the one she used to wear. But if that's the case, then she says she's a girl because she can turn back into her human form. How did you know all of that? 13 asked, slightly worried. Huh? Did I say that out loud? Izuku asked. Yep. Aizawa said. Well, you've managed to use your quirk to save people from all kinds of disasters, right? Yes, but my quirk can easily kill people. Some of you also have quirks like that, right? Izuku tried not to turn pale. In this superhuman society, quirks are closely regulated and certified, keeping anarchy at bay. Unless you live in America. However, even their quirks are registered. It's not the anarchy-filled hellhole the media portrays it as. Izuku nodded. His father had often said that Japan should continue to follow America's example. They had the no quirks in Puig type of law for about 25 years. After that it was phased out as society had stabilized. Now you could easily get a license to use your quirk. You didn't have to be a hero for it. But I digress. 13 said. There are many quirks that can kill with one misstep. With Aizawa's physical test you found out the physical limits of your quirks. With All Might's personal training, you found out how dangerous your powers are to others. They know nothing of how dangerous my quirk is, Izuku thought to himself. This class is a fresh start. You'll learn how to use your quirks to save people's lives. Your powers are not so you can harm others. I hope you leave here knowing your powers are meant to help others. As one of my dad's old superhero comics said, with great power comes great responsibility. It was a rather interesting one as well, Izuku thought. That is all. Thank you for listening. She finished. Bravo. Bravo. The class cheered. Alright then, first. But then Aizawa was cut off by the power being cut. And then some sort of portal opened by the fountain. The portal formed a face, and then a figure appeared. It had hands in its face. Everyone. Gather together and don't move. Aizawa ordered in a tone none of the students had ever heard before. 13. Protect the students. What's that? Kashima asked. That was a man with a hand on his face. And then came more people. Is this like the entrance exam? Kashima asked. Don't move. Their teacher instructed while putting on his goggles. Those are villains. 13 and Eraserhead, huh? The ugly man with a hand on his face asked. The teacher's schedule for today mentioned that All Might would be here as well. The gassy figure stated. You caused the trespassing the other day, correct? Eraserhead asked. Where is he? The ugly hand guy asked. I spent all this time gathering these guys. All Might, the symbol of peace. I can't believe he's not here. I wonder if he'll come if we kill some of you kids. Eraserhead's capture scarves flew into the air. 13 put an arm in front of the students. This is what pros have to fight on a daily basis. Izuku thought to himself. And then came the pain in his back. It was a lot more forceful than it usually was, causing him to gasp. Midoriya. Are you alright? Ida asked. I am fine. He gasped out, forcing the tendrils back. He hadn't eaten since those rabbits All Might had given him, and apparently using his quirk made the hunger stronger. Villains, there's no way they could get into a hero school. Kirishima shouted. Sensei, what about the trespass sensors? Momo asked. We have them around the school, but did they only appear here or around the school? Todoroki asked. Either way, since they're not going off, they either have only appeared here, or they have a villain who has a quirk that can get around that sort of thing. This area is isolated from the rest of the main campus, and there's a class here. They're fools, but they're not dumb. This attack was carefully planned. They must have a goal in mind. 13. Start the evacuation. Eraserhead ordered. Try to contact the school. The villains had a way to counteract the sensors. They might have a villain creating interference as well. Kaminari, try contacting the school as well. Yes, sir. The electric boy responded. But what about you, sensei? Izuku shouted. There are too many of them. Your style is capturing them. You can't rely on just one trick, he responded. He then jumped in the air. 3 villains started to ask who he was, as their intel said that it would only be All Might and 13. This gave Eraserhead time. He activated his quirk and shut their quirks down. He then grabbed them in the capture scarves and slammed them together, knocking them out. It's Eraserhead. He'll erase your quirk by just looking at you. Can he erase mutant quirks? One of the villains yelled, charging at him. No, but the skill you guys have is lacking, so it'll be fine, he shouted, taking out the villain who asked that question. Quirks like that tend to activate in close combat, so I took countermeasures. Izuku looked back at his teacher, who was taking the villains out one after the other. Wow, he's really skilled at fighting multiple people. This is no time for analysis. We need to get out of here, Ida shouted. Izuku nodded before running towards the exit with the rest of the class. And then a misty portal opened up, causing them to halt. I won't let you leave, the mist said, a form taking shape. Shoot. I ink in the guide that'll cause the most pro-Ms gets away. Aizawa thought to himself. Nice to meet you. We are the League of Villains, he politely said. It may be presumptuous of us, but we invited ourselves into the home of the heroes, UA High School, in order to have All Might, the symbol of peace, take his last breath. Izuku stopped shaking. We thought All Might would be here. Am I correct that he should have been here? The mist villain politely asked. Has there been some kind of change? No matter. This is the part I chose to play. 13 opened one of her suit's gloves, but no sucking occurred. Kirishima and Bakugo leapt at the villain, the explosive boy letting off a big ass. Did you consider that you'd get beaten by us before you did it? Kirishima taunted. Oh dear. That's dangerous, the villain said, completely unharmed. I forgot that you're still golden eggs, in spite of being students. Step back, 13 yelled. My job is to scatter you all, the villain shouted. He then enveloped the group. And then it's to torture you to death. The fog enveloped the students. What is this? Kirishima shouted. The mist enveloped them all or nearly all. Uraraka, Ida and Sato managed to get outside of the mist. Everyone, Ida shouted. The portal opened into the rock slide area, and Izuku began to fall. He screamed as he fell. Delaware smash, he shouted, flicking his finger. The shock wave slowed his fall enough that he didn't splat, but it was still rather painful. A warp quirk, he thought to himself, and he brushed himself off. And then Sayu fell down. He quickly activated Blacklight and coiled his legs. He then jumped up and caught her before her acceleration got too high. And then he landed with a crash. Are you okay? He asked the frog girl. I think, she said. And then Mineta fell down. Izuku repeated the tactic and managed to catch the perverted teen. Hey Izuku, he murmured out. This isn't a good thing, Ribbit, Sue said as they brushed themselves off. If we were in the shipwreck zone I'd be at to do more. Izuku wasn't paying that much attention. That villain knew the schedule, he said. Aizawa guessed that they caused the immediate break-in. They probably why used that as cover. As Todoroki said, they were waiting to pounce. But it's not like they can kill All Might, Mineta screeched. He'll just pound them into the ground. Mineta, why do you think they sound so confident? They probably have a way to kill him, Sayu said. Mineta gasped. And a strong villain just said to our faces that he'd torture us to death. I don't know if we'll be able to hold out until All Might arrives, and if we do, some of our class may have already been killed. What's that? Mineta screamed. They noticed a bunch of villains coming to the rocky area. These guys almost definitely have a way to kill All Might. Why else would they show up? But why would they come? Is it because he's a deterrent? Or is it because he's the symbol of peace? Izuku thought. His hands curled into a fist. But right now I don't care. He felt the tendrils within wriggle with anticipation. Eyes, he said. Sayu and Mineta looked at him. If these villains have a way to kill All Might then we need to stop them. We have to fight and win, he finished. Meanwhile, in the shipwreck zone, Todoroki was freezing villains left and right. It's embarrassing to lose to a child, isn't it? He deadpanned. In the collapsed zone, Kirishima and Bakugo were beating down several villains. This is bad, Katsuki thought to himself. If there are this many here, what about the others? In the mountain zone, Momo created several weapons and handed them out to her classmates. In the fire zone, Atreus stood defiantly. He braced himself, ready for the attack soon to come. In the squall zone, Fumikage and Koji stood back to back, surrounded by multiple villains. Back at the front, Shiro, Ida, Sato and Shaoji stood shoulder to shoulder with 13 in the front. Mina and Uraraka were behind them. And in the middle Eraserhead was just still doing his thing. And by thing I mean that he was beating the absolute crap out of all the villains approaching them. The ugly man in the thing with an exposed brain just stood by and watched. Back at the rock slide zone, Izuku turned to his friends, a determined look on his face. Meanwhile, in the UA lounge, Toshinori was constantly trying to call Aizawa. I'm sorry, the number you called is currently not in service, or had been disconnected. An automated voice cheerfully declared. I can't reach 13 Irizawa. He thought to himself. Whatever the reason, I'm neglecting my teaching duties because of what happened outside of work hours. I was foolish. What if I say something at the end? I do have 10 minutes left. He reinflated into his muscle form. I will G, and then he coughed up out as another voice made itself heard. Hold your horses. P. Principal Nezu. He shouted. Yes. Am I mouse? A dog. A bear. My real identity is the principal. He shouted. Your fur is well groomed, as usual. All Might said to his boss. The secret is keratin. He explained. Humans couldn't get this kind of color or luster. But let's talk about that later. He then reached for something. Look at this. He pulled out a tot to a news app, where it talked about how All Might had solved 3 incidents in an hour. Though the fault mostly lies with those who still cause true when you're here, you need to learn that you don't have to react every time there's an incident. He instructed the pro. You really haven't changed. You know your time as a hero is limited by the injury and its after effects. Along with that, you need to train one for all successor. He was now pacing back and forth. Since you are insistent on remaining the symbol of peace, the only way you can keep the world from finding out about both of those is to come here. All Might's body was now steaming. That's why I decided to let you become a teacher. Now Toshinori was back to being Toshinori. I think you can stay here and relax a little bit longer. In actuality, you can only teach the next class for a little bit, correct? I may have been the one to suggest it, but since you've accepted the position, I think you should prioritize your teaching duties. After all, there are plenty of hero agencies here. I see your point. Yagi murmured, feeling like Gran just gave him a lecture. But that is why I was preparing to go to SJ when you walked in. Wouldn't you still have to return almost immediately? Nezu was now pouring himself some tea. In that case, why not stay a while and listen to some of my theories on teaching and how they might help you in the future? This is gonna suck, Toshinori thought. Meanwhile, back at SJ, Shoji was using his court to find everyone. Shoji. Where is everyone? Are they alright? Ida asked in his usual voice. Yes. They've been scattered, but they're all still alive. He can't be hurt by physical attacks, and he can teleport. No fair. One of the students complained. Class representative. 13 asked. Yes ma'am, Ida shouted. Run to the school and inform them about what's going on. Our alarms aren't sounding and there's no signal. They have to have a person with an interfering quirk who is when they arrived. It would be more time expedient for you to tell the teachers than for us to find the person. But it would be a disgrace for me to leave you all behind. Ida argued. Hey. Emergency exit. There are alarms outside. If you can get there they won't follow you. Sato retorted. Use your court to save others. That's why you're here. 13 said. Very well. Ida responded, engines popping out. Really, you talk about your plans in front of the enemy? The villain deadpanned. It doesn't matter if you knew. 13 shouted, activating her quirk. The fog was destroyed on contact. Fight, are you stupid? Mineta shouted. You said they might kill All Might. What can we do? He screeched. Well, you can all die. A villain shouted. He used his quirk to throw a giant boulder at Izuku, crushing him against the wall. Izuku. Sayu shouted. Mineta had gone into shock by this point. The villain punched the purple midget into the wall as well. He groaned, so he was still alive. Now then, he sneered. Sayu whipped out her tongue, but the man caught it and yanked her towards him. He then slammed her into the ground by said tongue. Ugh, was her response. Well, little froggy, how are you? He mockingly asked, grabbing her by the hair. Our ribbard, she managed to croak out. I think we're going to have some fun, TOGETHER, he sang. Now she began to wake up a little. What? She whimpered as she began to struggle. He yanked her around so she had a perfect view of the boulder that crushed her friend. What was that axe stuff? See what's left of your friend. That'll be you. But first, I'm gonna have you scratch an itch of Min, you heard. She and her captors stared down. He coughed up out as he realized that something was sticking out of his chest. He looked down along with his prisoner. Sayu almost threw up. A barbed thing was sticking out of his chest. And then it pulled him backwards. In shock and pain he let her go. She fell to the ground and immediately looked up. The Ak mass was connected to the tendril. Then, she saw the man melt into Akgu. And he screamed. Oh god, his scream was horrifying. It told of unimaginable agony. And then the Ak mass shifted. It began to morph into a humanoid form. Finally, it settled on a familiar form, Izuku's torso. Another tendril grabbed what remained of Izuku's clothes before oozing into the clothes, filling out her friend. Her brain froze on that. Izuku. Erbit. She choked out. The thing in the form of her friend turned to her, eyes colder than the void of space. He then turned away, a snarl growing. His eyes shifted red, roared, and then he leapt. When the rock crashed into him, Izuku was sure he'd die. He didn't feel anything. His senses were destroyed. He didn't feel, smell, hear, or see. He just was. He saw light and tried to walk, but he realized he didn't have legs. He was just liquid. So he willed himself forward. And then he managed to get into light, and his senses reactivated just in time to hear what the villain was about to do to his friend. He saw red. Nothing else mattered. He had to save her. With a thought, he willed a feeding tendril through the villain. He then dragged him to what was left of him, so satisfied with his meal. Another tendril grabbed his clothes. Now, he just filled his clothes out. Izuku. Rupert. He turned towards his friend, and saw her horrified face. He turned away. And then he roared. If my quirk is going to be known, let it be known by saving my friends, he thought. And then he just became a passenger in his body, enjoying the ride. Sure, he'd feel guilty later, but now he could finally let loose the hunger he had denied for so long. Bakugo heard the roar. He had heard it before, in his nightmares. It was always the last thing he heard before he woke up. What the hell was that? Kashima shouted. Get down. Kasuki shouted, tackling his fellow student. Hey, get off. Do you want to be devoured? Then stay the fuck down. He screamed. Wanna know why I told Deku what I told him? What does that have anything to do with this? Kirishima screamed. Because Deku's quirk is more than a strength enhancer. So much more. He muttered. What does it do? The hardening teen asked. Then a villain appeared. The Yoryubra, he was killed mid-sentence by Izuku, claws slicing him into 3 equal parts. And then came the tendrils, snaking from 4 holes in his shirt. They impaled themselves in the man. The bits of him liquefied and rolled into him. Then Izuku's eyes turned towards him. Kirishima wet himself. There weren't the green eyes filled with warmth. No, these were red. They were feral. And they were hungry. He lunged over them. A villain had been trying to escape. Help me. Help Yugurg, he groaned out as a tendril impaled itself in his leg and dissolved him. With another roar, Izuku leapt out of the zone. That's the full extent. He eats people. Bakugo growled to the near catatonic teen. Shoji flinched. What is it? Uraraka shouted. A heartbeat stopped and another. 2 people have died. What? Uraraka shrieked. And there goes another one. What's causing that? Sato screamed. Something's coming. Everyone turned toward the direction Shoji was pointing towards. Ak and Red Air was streaking towards him. Suddenly it turned towards where Izawa was fighting. Is it a villain? Sato shouted. The villain fighting 13 turned. That is unexpected. I did not know one of your classmates was so thirsty. What? They all shouted. Prey was thickest there. Lots of down prey, ready to be eaten. So much food and no one asked for any. Therefore he got it all. The hunter was busy. Perhaps it was best to ask first. After all, he was higher up. Should he challenge him for dominance? No. What a silly thing. The hunter could hurt him, unlike the prey. And the hunter was friendly towards the pack. Sure, he was strict, but he wanted them to grow strong. And then he heard a scream from one of his packmates. It came from the mountain. He snarled and changed direction. Now, how was he going to climb it? He jumped onto the side and soon found himself running vertically. Oh yes, he'd get to them shortly. Meanwhile, in the shipwreck zone, Todoroki surveyed his handiwork. All of the villains, along with most of the zone, were frozen solid. Scatter and kill us. You're just a bunch of thugs with no idea how to use your quirks. He monotoned. Evidently all but 4 or 5 of the villains here were just cannon fodder. He thought. None of them would pose a threat to a pro. In fact, I'm almost positive that most of us could take them on ourselves. You know, yourselves will slowly die like this. He monotoned. The villains began to whimper. I want to be a hero, and killing you wouldn't be very heroic. Now then, he approached one of the villains. On what basis do you think you can kill All Might? He asked, frost coming from his hand, ready to suffocate the one he was asking. In the mountain zone, Momo, Jiro and Kaminari were fighting with the weapons Momo created. Kaminari was panicking. I thought I was gonna die. What's with these guys? He screamed. Just shut up and fight. Jiro shouted. Then give me a weapon. He shouted back. You have electricity. She retorted. I can only cover myself. If I try to use a burst it'll affect you too as well. Jiro then kicked him, sending him into a villain. Then I'll use you as a stun gun. She shouted. He instinctively used his quirk, electrocuting the villain. Oh, that'll work. He said. And then they heard a roar. A figure leapt up from the sheer cleft face, claws outstretched. Is that Izuku? Momo shouted. A villain turned just in time for the claws to impale themselves in his head. And then 4 tendrils snaked from his back and impaled themselves in him. The man screamed as he was picked up and liquefied. He fought as his mass decreased, limbs splaying before being dissolved. Eventually the struggles ceased and the last bit of him disappeared. A snarl erupted from their classmate's mouth. The villains paused. Did you just eat him? One shouted. Izuku then rushed the speaker, punching him so hard that his fist went through his ribcage and out the other end. Those tendrils then inserted themselves into his arms and liquefied him too. He's a monster. Another shouted before turning tail and fleeing. The rest followed suit, although another was caught by a tendril wrapping around his leg. Arg. No. Please let me go. Let me Erpluga, he shouted before dissolving as the other 3 tendrils injected themselves into his foot. Momo whimpered. And then Izuku turned to them. His eyes were clouded and red. His claws were covered in ooze. He slowly walked towards them. Kaminari threw himself in front of the girls, arms out. You will not touch them, he shouted. Izuku paused, head tilted in confusion. Then he turned. Safe? He asked. What? Kaminari asked. Are you safe? He repeated, pointing at the 3 of them. Why yes, we're safe. Jiro stuttered. Was this the demon who just killed and devoured 3 villains good? He then leapt into the air before plummeting down. Then watched as he created a small crater before he sprinted off, unharmed by the fall. What was that? Momo shouted. I have no clue. Kaminari replied, before he collapsed. The blue-haired villain with hands all over him rushed towards Eraserhead. 27 seconds, he thought. 24 seconds. 12 seconds. Who's this? Eraserhead said aloud as he tried to capture him. The man dodged, and so he rushed forward. 17 seconds, the villain thought. And then Eraserhead elbowed him in the gut. However, the man caught his elbow. Damn. Aizawa thought. It's hard to see because you're moving around, but there's an instant when your hair falls. That's when you've finished in action. Aizawa inked and then saw the villain turning his jacket into grey powder. You shouldn't push yourself, Eraserhead. The villain mocked. Now his hand touched his skin, and that began to flake away, revealing the muscle underneath. He then erased the villain's quirk and got away as more villains rushed him. This time he mostly dodged. Your quirk isn't suited for fighting large groups, is it? The villain taunted. Is this too different from your usual job? After all, most of your fights start as a surprise attack followed by a short fight. And yet you jumped at us. Was it to put your students at ease? He mocked, as Aizawa tried to catch his breath. Another few villains lunged, but he effortlessly subdued him. You're very cool. The hand-faced man said. He was thinking about orders from Sensei. Flashback, before the invasion. Now then, Tormuna, there are some things we must cover before your attack. Sensei has said. Name them, Sensei. He has shouted. First off, try to not kill Eraserhead, if he's there. He is the student's homeroom teacher, so him appearing isn't out of the question. He is a shining example of what heroes should be. With luck more will be like him. Second, do not kill these 2 students. In fact, try to avoid harming them. He held up 2 photos. One was a kid with poofy green hair, and one had ashy blonde hair. Failure on the first will be met with disappointment. However, I will forgive you. Failure with the second, however, will cost you your life. I clear. Shikuragi hadn't heard Sensei sound so forceful since the injury. Yes, Sensei. He responded, burning the memory of the 2 in his mind. Flashback end. Oh, by the way, Hero Aizawa turned to see the thing with the exposed brain look down on him. I'm not the last boss. The thing reared up and slashed his face, knocking his goggles off, before tearing into him. I was told to spare you, but you leave me no choice. At the front entrance, the warping villain was struggling against 13. Your quirk destroys everything it touches. It truly is an amazing quirk. However, you're a hero who rescues people. This means that your battle experience is lacking. He then opened a portal from behind the hero. 13 gasped as the gate appeared behind her. You have turned yourself into dust. The villain spoke. You got me, she murmured before passing out. A female figure appeared, badly hurt but alive. Sensei. Mina shouted. Iida. Stop staring and run. Sato shouted. Damn it. He shouted, engines going full blast. The villain turned his attention to him. I see. You are one of the children not scattered. We only wish to battle All Might. If the other teachers appear, things will become much more difficult. A portal opened above him. Iida gasped. And then Shoji jumped in front of the portal and enclosed it. Go. He shouted, obviously in pain. I will not allow this. The villain shouted. Iida was then swallowed by the mist. Hunter is in pain. Hunter must be helped. Others are safer. Izuku turned towards the main area. Hey Eraserhead. The thing that's pinning you is the anti-symbol of peace, the bioengineered Nomu. Meanwhile, in the collapse zone, Bakugo peeked his head out. We're clear. Let's go. Kirishima managed to shake himself out of his stupor. Did I Izuku always have that P-power? He stuttered. Bakugo nodded. He first used them when we were 4. He ate a pedophile. The pedo should have considered himself lucky that Izuku's old man didn't get to him first. Why you're more afraid of Izuku's D-dad than the G-guy himself. Fuck yes I am. That man was, beyond a doubt, the scariest man in the world. And only Auntie Inko, Deku and my old man could control him. Which is weird because my dad's usually the meek one. He said as an afterthought. As so why you're not afraid that Izuku might kill us? Dude, I'm terrified about that. I have been since I was 4. But right now we need to focus on getting out. Deku seems to be more focused on the villains. There are more of them so that'll keep him busy for a while. Kirishima nodded. At the front gate, the villain was suddenly sucked away. Cha. The warper asked in shock. Uraraka was levitating him. You have to have a physical body. Go eat it. She shouted. He reached the doors and slowly pried them open. The villain tried to reach him, but Sato and Zero managed to pull him back. Iida then took off towards Yue. He's gonna call for support, the villain muttered. The Nomu broke Izawa's arm again. You can erase quirks, the hand-wearing villain said. It's wonderful, but nothing impressive. In the face of overwhelming power, you're practically quirkless. At those words, a roar was heard. Nomu inked in surprise. The villain noticed and saw Akadrater slam down in front of him. Release Hunter. Now. A deep feral voice demanded. Izawa gasped when he saw who spoke. It was none other than Izuku. His eyes were red, filled with anger. His claws were out, dripping with ood. And what the fuck was coming out of his back? Nomu roared. And then it tried to swipe at his student. To his shock, Izuku caught the hand. And then he ripped it off of Nomu's arm. The thing bellowed in rage. He saw the grasping things liquefy the hand and did it eat it. The Nomu then regrew his hand and leapt at his student. Izuku then punched it back several meters. And then he felt something nudging his boot. It was one of those tendrils. He would have screamed if he could have. It didn't impale him though. It wrapped around his leg. Another wrapped around his other leg. The other two wrapped around his chest in a tight but comforting grip. And then Izuku leapt. They soon found themselves next to the houses in the area. Stay. You'll be safe here. His student said, carefully putting him down. You pray. Can I have them? He asked before leaving. What? You pray. Those you beat. Can I have them? T the villains. Why? Izawa asked. To consume. Izuku explained. L like the Nomu's hand. He suddenly shouted, nausea taking over. He threw up, which caused him to shake with pain again. Hunter needs healing. Izuku asked, worry in his eyes. Before Izawa could respond, a tendril buried itself in his back. He screamed in fear. He expected death to come, but he saw a mass traveling outwards from Izuku and into him. And then the pain came. It was like he had been dunked in lava. He screamed as whatever Izuku was made of rushed through him. It healed his arms and his face, even curing his dry eye. However, Izuku wasn't done with his eyes. With a sharp pain, he felt another layer of skin cover his eyes. To his shock, he could still see, and without inking his eyes were moist again. And then that much smaller bulge left through the tendril. Now better? Izuku asked, head cocked. Why yes. He responded. Can I have your prey? He asked again. Why are you asking? I couldn't stop you. Silly Hunter. It's polite. It's yours. I don't steal. Izawa sighed. Those villains had attacked his students. Normally he would have said no, but he was getting attached to the little shits. Fine. He coughed before he finally fainted, seeing Izuku leap back to the Nomu before passing out. Shigaraki Tamura. The warping villain said. Did you manage to kill 13 Kurogiri? The now named Tamura asked. 13 is incapacitated. Kurogiri replied. Unfortunately a student with the quirk Suida E for speed managed to escape. And on top of that, we have that thing to deal with. He pointed towards the clawed demon, which was perched on the steps, roaring in challenge to Nomu, who replied in kind. The demon then leapt and crashed into Nomu, sending them spiraling into the ground. That was one of the students Sensei told us to avoid, was it not? Shigaraki asked. Correct. Evidently he knew of the power that this student had and worried for us. Kurogiri responded. Shigaraki started to scratch his neck, a sign that he was irritated. Damn it Kurogiri. If you weren't our warp gate I would kill you right now. He snarled. Meanwhile the demon ripped off Nomu's right arm and ate it. Nomu regenerated it with little delay. We can't win against dozens of pros. Also, our tank is preoccupied with the surprise boss, he growled, pointing to the Udi brawl. The demon roared as Nomu ripped its right arm off, only for the severed limb to shrivel up. Those tendrils then impaled a down villain. Said villain let out a cry of anguish before being devoured. The monster's arm regenerated in a flurry of tendrils. It's game over Tormur. Kurogiri summarized. Game over, huh? Since we're going to be leaving soon, why don't we shatter All Might's pride a bit? How about we break some of the precious golden eggs? Why won't this thing die? The other prey died. Why won't this one die? It managed to beat up Hunter, and the prey said it was to kill Apex, but Apex is wounded. Therefore Apex might actually die. This thing must be destroyed before Apex could get hurt. And then the doors you open. Everyone turned to the cloud of dust that appeared. Heavy footsteps echoed throughout the building. The students near the entrance started to shake, not out of fear, but out of relief. It's all right now. Why? Because I am here. All Might shouted. Oh, I see. We're getting a continue. Shigaraki murmured. Apex is here.